Hopefully we're live now.
It says we're live.
It says we're live. Okay, so assuming that we are going live right now, good evening, folks. This is a Monday, the first day of the work week, and a first for me. Um, this is the first hosting that I'm doing, and I'm pleased to be sharing this with Mr. Eric Rolon. Did I get that last name right?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. Well, my name's Stuart Davis, and this is a flawed man's take on the Bible and God. I'm a flawed man of God. I am a deacon at a small church just outside of Richmond, Virginia. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm very much a layman. I'm not a pastor. I'm not that is not my strong suit, but it is a great interest to me. But what I do try to do here is offer exposure for Christian beliefs and the Christian life, because what a lot of folks who are not part of who do not have a relationship with God or a fellowship and community um, with Christians, you kind of there might be that connotation that we're set apart. You know, you kind of think of that kooky religion feel to it. We are just average people trying to work out our daily lives and deal with the same ruts and problems and tribulations that other people do. Some major and some minor, but we're all trying to get through it. And if I can share my thoughts through that in whatever way I can, then good. Just got confirmation that they can hear us.
Excellent.
But if I can help in that exposure of any way, that's what my plan is with this project and with this channel. So I was introduced to Eric. I was watching a live stream that he was on with a gentleman named Nick Makeda for Lost Plane in the Interwebs. He had Eric on as a guest, and I could tell right from what he was talking about that he had a strong faith basis in his life. And I decided that, hey man, this could be a guy that I could reach out to and maybe do some collaborations with, get some advice on. And I've got it. And I hate social media so much, but it is such a necessity these days
It
if you're going to do
is.
something like this. But I DM'd him over Twitter. I have literally one follower. It's my brother. So I was he was thinking I was a kook, but he responded back. We had a good conversation while playing Halo, something that we both
Mhm.
we both enjoy. We talked about Halo, um, talked a lot about God, about being parents. Me being a little bit more seasoned, him being a newer
just
parent,
just a bit.
just a wee bit seasoned. But talking, because we're in those different phases of being fathers, and working those out with our wives who are working out being mothers. But just a very rich and fulfilling conversation. I really liked it, and Eric was eager and willing to come on and discuss some things that he has researched, and hopefully we can get him on for some other things. But tonight
Be great.
we were talking about the Nephilim, and I'll let Eric lead on that. But first, I'll let you introduce yourself, Eric, so you can
All
go ahead.
right. Well, first off, thank you very much for having me on. I'm very excited for where the conversation is going to go tonight. For those who have never seen me before or who saw me on Nick Ricada, this will be a little bit redundant for you, but for all those who haven't seen me, my name is Eric Rolon. I am a biblical scholar slash apologist slash father, husband, and an actor. Um, I have been, I guess, going on, I think, coming into my 11th year of being a full time actor inside the entertainment business. But as what started off as on answering a few questions that a self proclaimed atheist cousin of mine had posed to me regarding Christianity, regarding the Word of God in general, regarding stances and viewpoints on slavery in the Bible, corruption, pain, suffering, just a whole umbrella of topics. I really discovered a supreme love for biblical scholarship, and I had grown up in the church my entire life. Um, Kind of walked away from God in my mid 20s, and then when I was reaching up to touch rock bottom, I ended up coming back to Him and reignited my faith. And I found in a number of ways I'm a good teacher. So my YouTube channel is fraught with videos how to make Halo armor. But I found that through being able to create these tutorials, that it came naturally to me to be able to explain to people the inner themes of the Bible, what's literal versus what's metaphorical, and where all those little threads start to unravel the bigger picture. So I've now really decided that I want to push all in on actually teaching the Bible in an apologetic sense and helping clear up a lot of the misunderstandings that people have with so much of what happened in the Old Testament, like violence and pillaging and destruction, and being able to juxtapose that with so many of the Christian world who live largely in the red letters or largely just in the New Testament, who may not really think to delve back into the older stories. So that's where my current journey is taking me.
Yeah, it's when you go through taking a trip through Leviticus, which my first my first 3 attempts to go cover to cover in the Bible all ended in Leviticus, and
Right?
it didn't
Yeah.
didn't take long.
Camping instructions and whatnot.
I eventually powered through it because it was my goal. But it again, and I've said it before, going cover to cover with the Bible is such a good journey to take because it puts things
Mhm.
more into context when we go to the sermons. This is nothing against pastors because this is I think that's a good formula for a sermon is when you take these passages and we're going to study this because you never know who's going to be coming into the church at any
Yeah.
time and catching a sermon and who might be who just when they get in there and they might not understand what you're going through if you try to do it this way.
Yeah.
But doing it on your own, there was so much better understanding of context, especially to me, especially in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it's a little bit different because so much of the New Testament is Paul after Jesus.
Mhm.
It's so much Paul, and
Oh, yes.
it's so many letters and whatnot. So it's you can take Corinthians and Ephesians and everything and how he's dealing with these things. You can parse that out much easier without losing a lot of the scope. But where the Old Testament is much more linear, especially.
Yeah, you
when it-
really need a map for the Old Testament. And I don't know if you've looked too much into Chuck Missler, God rest his soul. He passed away, I believe, in 2018. But that was the minister who really ignited the spark inside me for biblical
Mhm,
scholarship, and not just biblical scholarship, but like apocryphal scholarship, delving into other ancient religions and seeing where there are seemingly intersections or where they've borrowed from the Bible inside their
mhm,
mythology and whatnot. But he does well, before he passed away, he did a fantastic job of being able to break down just every single tiny bit of minutia to every single verse. He would do these very thorough expositional commentaries. One of the things he always said was the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. So to say that the Bible, like there's plenty of commentaries out there. One of the best ones that I've seen is on enduringword.com, and there's a number of different contributors from back as far as like the 1700s who have been taken from their various commentaries and included into this thing to build this huge just utilitarian tool for anybody who wants to get into the Bible. One of the things that Chuck maintained was the Bible, you can have all these other commentaries, but the Bible is the best commentary on itself. But in order to get the benefit of that, like you were suggesting, you really need to read the whole thing through and not just cherry pick verses. Because if you have a question of it, say on Genesis chapter 1, and you don't see it being answered by the end of the book of Genesis, keep reading because it will be answered before you're done reading the book. It may take you the better part of a year to get there,
Yeah,
but I promise you it will be answered.
yeah. I ended up having to do it because I'm much more of an audiobook person. I
Sure.
ended up doing it on my commute to work, and at the time I was I was at night. I was working night shift, so going home at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's very empty, it's very quiet, and you're tired a little bit, and so
Mhm.
listen to that Leviticus. You don't want to listen to when you're tired, but again, but when you're reading Kings, if you're reading Samuel, if you're reading
Oh,
some of
yeah.
those, like it is captivating. Reading, and one of the things I've brought up recently is one of the things I've brought up recently is is when people they I think that there's a connotation with the Bible that it's very rule book. It's very much bland. You know, God talking and giving rules and telling people
Mhm.
where they should go, and Jesus telling people how they're blessed, and that's just it's just a lot of rules, and then Paul telling everybody how wrong they are. Not
Yeah.
God or Jesus, but telling the early Christians, hey, you need to straighten up in these ways.
Yep.
They don't realize there's so much going on, and there's so much narrative going on, and that's why I love the Old Testament. That's why
Mhm.
that's I always say Jesus is the goal. We all want to be like Jesus, be more like Jesus, and the things that he does and what he represents us, and we look to him as our source of salvation.
Mhm.
However, the guys in the Old Testament, there's a lot more relatable folks because again, lots of flawed men, and even some of the
Mhm.
big guys like David, um,
Oh,
is
yeah.
is just it's crucial to remember. Like, look, the Jewish faith it still identifies by the Star of David. He is that big of a
Yep.
deal, and Jesus coming from that line was such a big deal. And he is a star in the Bible.
Mhm.
But like a lot of stars, he's got a lot of problems backstage.
Yeah,
Well,
just
not
a
so much
few little
just
problems.
a couple, and that was the old thing, it's like he wasn't a bad guy, and I'll talk more about this when we get into Saul, but,
Mm,
it's Saul and David is Saul is the man who was flawed and gave up and
yep.
just gave into it. David was the one who fell into it, realized what was going on when, Nathan comes up to him and other things that
Yep.
happen and go, all right. I can't change what I've done. I'm going to make amends. I'm gonna let God know I'm sorry, and I'm gonna try to be better. And he doesn't do it all the way right, but he does it enough. And considering what happens after him, I mean,
Mhm.
Solomon makes has slips up a little bit along the way too, but the majority of the Israelite history and of Israel and Judah is replete with bad actors in charge.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole minefield, and it's really interesting, um, when you look at the Bible, and specifically the Old Testament, and you look at any other civilization that has existed, the Jewish people, even though they're God's chosen people, they literally became the worst creatures to ever walk the face of the earth. Even when you look inside the Book of Kings and then re-echoed again inside the two books of Chronicles, it flat out says inside there, um, in I forget who which king takes the reign, but it talks about all of Israel becoming even worse and more vile and more of a stench to God than even the Canaanites were. And we're talking about
That's a big
around
step.
yeah, and we're talking about like around 29 tribes of to varying degree, angel human hybrids and giants in between there. We're talking about tribes that were into bestiality, into cannibalism, into child sacrifice, into inter I guess you can call inter civil war, which would always result in slavery, rape, pillaging, more cannibalism, more child sacrifice. And Israel was called even worse than them. So when people want to try and take shots at Israel for not being such a great collective of people, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. For a time, yeah, they were literally the worst things on the planet. But the Bible is so much more than just a chronology of history. It's a redemption story.
Yes,
And
that is absolutely. Bible is a story of redemption.
yep.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's the most important thing for if you're a person who is looking um, for meaning in life, if you're looking for what is this all about, and you see everything that goes around you. This was the first thing that I think I spoke about the very first video I put on YouTube was me saying, look, you look around you and you see all the things that are going on, how intricate this world is, how the way the universe operates
Mhm.
when you look at it, how complex it is, and the interactions and the people that you know, and the goodness that they show, and the faults that they show, but they're all just they're so complex. It's difficult to put that into the cosmic accident um, narrative, but
Mhm.
but that's what's all around us in culture today. But if you're looking for meaning, but you're and you come to Christianity and you look at God and you immediately there the worry is, and it's very real at times. the guilt. I mean, I feel it myself
Yep.
too. Guilt about things that we do, the things that I do personally that I repetitive, right?
Yep.
Repetitively, you know,
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Yep.
being sarcastic to somebody on the internet and being rude or something, or doing something that slips up. Maybe not being the
Hmm.
best person, not having the best days.
Sure.
Letting your Christian bearings slip is what I will say normally when I'm
Yeah.
around company.
Good way of putting it there.
Yeah, but that can push you away from having a relationship with God if you don't recognize that this is all of us working towards this. Even the biblical folks, even the folks like I mean, you can take Daniel, maybe take Daniel, Joseph, and a couple of other guys, Job, a
Hmm.
couple of these other guys out. Even though God does get a little stern with Job there, but
Oh, just
still,
a wee bit.
right? Yeah, a monologue. Oh,
Like,
you
oh,
can
where were
just
you when I hung the stars?
I did
Where were
all the
you
things.
bound when I bound Orion and the Pleiades? It's like, oh, can you sever the gravitational bonds of them? Well, no, God. Yeah, yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
that's
Just
right.
shut up and listen to me for a second.
Dad's gonna talk. But us taking those three like maybe a handful total of folks in the Bible who are like just righteous, blameless folks in the eyes of the Lord.
Yep.
Um, Everybody else, including some very big names, and some very important people that are good guys. They aren't bad guys like Saul or Ahab or people like that. But really pivotal folks, um, they get there. They reach the end, and God is happy with them.
Hmm.
And if even if He realizes that we're not perfect, and I think He's pleased more when we overcome the the struggles that we have. And I think, and at least that's my hope. That's the impression I get from the Bible, that God loves an underdog coming through and reaching Him when there are times where He feels all the way lost. I mean, look at Paul. I mean, Paul
Hmm.
Paul might be the greatest redemption story of all time, coming from.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love there's even a passage, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it boils down to God saying, I desire your righteousness more so than I do sacrifice of your animals or your tithes or whatnot. Um, and it's really freeing to hear creator of the universe say that, because then it takes away the ritualistic aspect that so many other religions have tried to make Christianity out to be. It takes away the mundane, repetitious act of, oh, I do these things. I say 4 Hail Marys, 3 Our Fathers. I go through my entire rosary once. I drink some holy water. Okay, cool. Now that I've done all these things, now I guess I can consider myself back in good grace, or now I've somehow made my contribution to the faith. It's like, no, 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 no. Don't think of it as a religion, because it's not. Um, Treat it as a relationship. And God desires your worship through your righteousness and the way that you're living your life way more than He wants the money that you might give on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah, it's where so many people, like you were mentioning before, people will view the Bible as this amalgamation of rules. All these, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, if we really want to get down to it, we see inside the Old Testament, there's about 613 laws given, and then they get reduced down to 12, and then they get reduced down to 3, and that was do justice, love mercy, walk humbly before your God. And then a lot of people they say, well, and then Jesus reduced it further. Jesus didn't so much reduce it as He just pointed out the two main ones, and that's love God and love people. There's somewhere in the vicinity of 80 to 90-ish commands that are actually given inside the Old Testament, or sorry, the New Testament, but it's reiterations of the many facets of love. And if you do a study on love itself through the Old Testament into the New Testament, you see that love is so much more than just passion for another person or passion for an item. It's got so many different characteristics that have to be lived out in order for that love to be, as the Bible calls it, perfect. The perfect love that casts out all fear. So when Jesus points out those two big commandments, it's so that you can learn to love not just yourself, but love God, who you're supposed to give all your devotion to, but then learn how to better love your fellow man. Subsequently, being able to foster community, build a family around you of other believers, and then through that love that you guys are learning how to cultivate, be able to literally infect your surrounding environment, your surrounding neighborhood, your surrounding postal codes, and be able to share that in a real and tangible way. So it's not so much restrictive as it is, hey, I know we all have this desire inside of us to love and be loved. Here's the best practices on how to do that most effectively, so that you don't keep coming up empty-handed every single time you try and abide by these 613 things that I laid out inside the Old Testament. Now it's like, hey, on your worst day, I accept you. On your best day, I delight in you. Now, as you were even saying about the flawed men and the flawed women inside the Bible, God never, ever, ever, ever uses the perfect. It's always the misfits. It's always the losers who he employs. And if he can justify somebody like David or someone like Jacob, man, he can justify any of us.
Yeah, I've been doing the read through the Bible. I've been very critical of Jacob, but the more you read it, and the more and this
He's a
is one of the
shyster,
oh man, yeah, look. But and I think that we're going to get into this a little bit too tonight
for sure.
because of because he's going to touch into this a little bit because my whole thing was why does God go with Jacob instead of Esau? Because it sounds really like Jacob, like you said, Jacob's a shyster, right?
Oh, yeah,
He's just shady little character
he
from time to time.
is.
And Esau seems like this hardworking man. He's a man of the earth. He seems like the kind of guy that God would get behind. But we look a little bit about his personal life decisions, and maybe there's a reason. And when you talked
Yep.
about being worse than the Canaanites, Israel being the Israelites being worse than the Canaanites, that's where I think we're going to start getting into the meat of tonight's conversation. So,
Sure.
we're like I said, we're going to talk about the Nephilim. The
Yes.
Nephilim is a subject. It seems that a lot of folks have many various different theories on, but I think the prevailing one seems to be that they are a some sort of hybrid of human and an angel, or at least it
Yep.
appears that way. Now, there's our folks that disagree, and if you're watching and you have difficulty with accepting this, hear Eric out. He's done a lot of research on her. I'm a very open minded about it, but I know because I came from a household where the supernatural and superstitious type of things were very much clamped down. There wasn't a whole lot of
Yep.
it's taken me many years, and I'll get into it probably in another stream at some point. But it took me many years and a lot of experience to know that there is a lot more out there. And if you grow up like I did, and for most of the viewers I think here from me are from the Richmond area, there's a lot of Civil War fodder around here, which means there's a lot of stuff that went on. And there are some people who say they've seen things. I know I've talked to people who have not walked in very Christ-like circles,
Hmm.
in very much pagan and um, worshiping sense, and summon and dabbling in the dark side of the world. That have seen things that I believe because there is biblical examples of these things popping up. So
Hmm.
if you have difficulty in wrapping your head around the supernatural, believing that it's possible, remember, God is a supernatural being. And a lot of what happens, understanding what an angel is, which might be beyond our real comprehension, but the
Hmm.
core concept, it is a supernatural being. It is beyond our explanation, probably in the way that this physical plane exists. And God, the same way. This is we're talking about a being that is all knowing, all powerful, and probably in all likelihood and all on all possible measures, probably just beyond space and time.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
We're talking about things that are on in any understanding supernatural. So
Hmm.
keep an open mind and remember, just because we don't see this stuff going on nowadays doesn't mean that one, it's not going on, and two, that it didn't happen back in the day. But
Yep.
there are some. But I will let you really run with your take on the Nephilim.
For sure. So little, I guess, setup too for anybody who is not really familiar with the story of the Nephilim and another tribe after the flood called the Rephaim, and where they fit into the Bible as a whole. I encourage you to go back and read the chapter Genesis 6.
I'm
It's
gonna pull that
the
up actually.
Yeah, sure.
For us.
It talks about, and it's by the time you get to Genesis, like the very first clutch of verses there, Genesis 6, and then verse 4 is where it really touches on what's going on. But you have up to this point, this is post Adam, this is post Cain, this is post Seth. Now you have Noah and his posterity living, and at this point, the earth is completely corrupted. The word that's used for corrupted is not corrupted in the sense of like, oh, we're taking bribes. It's literally corrupted at the genetic level, save for Noah, who is of a pure and spotless bloodline. He's not a sinless man, but he's a blameless man, meaning more or less why David was called a man after God's own heart is because even though he was not sinless, he recognized his folly immediately and he always repented of it and tried to do better next time. So figure Noah is the same kind of way. Um, Up to this point, you've had the whole falling out that took place back in Eden. You had the issue where Adam and Eve both ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For that, they were endowed with suddenly all this knowledge that otherwise wouldn't have been of any use to them because they were living as perfect beings inside a garden where literally everything was given to them and laid out for them. But now they have this knowledge, which is it's at the time, suddenly now it's become of supreme utility because they're going to be kicked out. They've got to learn how to farm. They've got to learn how to raise a family. They've got to learn how to work the land, how to herd cattle, and all this stuff. So from there, you have enmity put between God and between Satan. And you have the old verse, your seed and his seed, I will put enmity between the two of them. You will strike his heel, he will crush your head. So there's been this war and this at odds between Satan and Jesus for pretty much all of eternity. Well, one of the key ways as to how Satan went about trying to set about making sure that either one, Jesus would never be born, two, if he was born, he wouldn't be human, or three, he could wipe out every man, woman, and child before even giving the opportunity for the Messiah to be born. That was through the contaminating of our gene pool. That was through his fallen angels taking up and copulating with the children of man to create human angel hybrids called Nephilim, which is pre-flood, and then Rephaim, also Nephilim post-flood. So for those who don't know, that's what the large focus of this is going to be. And I'll tell you right now, once you understand the Nephilim connection to the Bible as a whole, it makes the entire book so much easier to read and so much easier to understand. It also justifies the violence that you see being carried out by Israel inside the Old Testaments against all these tribes that God has specifically said, I want you to wipe out every man, woman, child, burn the place to the ground, kill all the cattle, don't take any precious possessions. Save for the gold, the silver, and the bronze. Those are for me. Everything else, raise it to the ground. It makes it all make sense.
Yeah, and I guess that's where one of my first questions comes up, as like I said, and for everybody who's not, I'm taking very much the position of a layman because that's mostly where I live. I read the Bible, I try to understand it as best I can, but I don't have the research background. I don't have that. I'm just not as learned in that aspect. But what I do have is a lot of questions. So my first question there is not so much of a stumbling block here, but it is kind of just a curiosity because you said, you're talking about Satan trying to um, basically spoil the prophecy of Jesus coming and the new covenant that will eventually come with
Yes.
with him being born and then being crucified. Do you is that so? I guess that imparts that Satan does have some sort of knowledge of what God's plan is, and
Yes.
but it comes across at first to me like just at reading it when I'm reading it, it's like okay, this looks more like angels were, some of the angels were tempted by the beauty of these women, and so they said, you know, to hell for better or worse, the hell with being an angel. I'm just
Pretty
gonna
much.
go down and hang out with these ladies. But it sounds a little bit more sinister the way you put it, where it might be, look, I'm going to do this because my allegiance is to Satan, and I'm doing this um, with an actual purpose to corrupt, and not just doing it because I want to, because there's a desire there in me.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, um, that's why I point out those kind of three little distinguishing markers. It's like his entire plot, and as you mentioned, Satan, he does know the Bible. Even the demons know the Bible.
Oh yeah,
Like even when we're reading inside the Old Testament about, oh, you're able to cast out demons, great. Oh, you profess God? Great. Well, even the demons know who God is, so don't think that makes you any cooler or any smarter than your fellow man. It's like
Yeah.
they know who God is too, and they tremble at his name. So don't pretend like you know something new that they don't. Because it's like, let's face it, Satan, his angels, and then the demons, they have been around since the beginning. They have seen history. They've lived history. They know our books. They know our writings. The thing, though, that Satan has going that is his, I would say, his greatest detriment is that as he is the father of lies, not only does he deceive us or deceive our fellow man, but he deceives himself. So he is still convinced that he can win this thing.
Yeah.
But he does know the end from the beginning. He knows what's written inside the Bible. He has convinced himself, and I have to imagine that that has to cause an immense amount of internal anxiety for him. Like I don't know what the equivalent of a panic attack for for an angelic being or an angelic beast is, but I imagine he is going through that 24/7 because I think there is a twinge in the back of his mind that lets him know this is how it's going to end. So the a lot of people tighten up when they read that first chunk of verses there inside Genesis 6, and I'll just read the first few verses
Sure.
for everybody here. So this is increasing corruption in the earth, and as I touched on before, this is corruption on the blood level. It's also a large reason why inside Leviticus and in Exodus and in Deuteronomy we're told, hey, when you eat an animal, don't eat it with the blood because life is in the blood. So Genesis 6, we'll just go through the first we'll go through the first 8 verses. So when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created, from the face of the land, man and animals, and creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And then I'll just read the next 2 verses here because it explains a bit about Noah. It says, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we know that his posterity was also of a clean bloodline, if you will, possibly being sullied after the flood. But the big takeaway from that, and this is where a lot of people they run into confusion, and for those who haven't been able to check into the book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. It's by an author. His name is Gary Wayne. It is a humongous book.
Good night.
It is. It's about 814 pages, and it goes through
Took a
just
lot
about.
out of one chapter.
Oh my god! Yeah, there is. I think what started off, I believe, for him was around 12 chapters, and now it's like 96, something like that. The book is fantastic as a history, but it's also fantastic as just like a desk reference guide. But he goes through pretty much all of mythology. This book was 30 years in the making, thousands and thousands of research hours. But he goes through all the mythology that we see inside Greek culture, Sumerian, Babylonian, Indian, Egyptian, and he's able to find the connections to where they link in with the actual biblical story. So if you get a chance, check that out. But the reason why it's called the Genesis 6 conspiracy is because that's where the plot to literally wipe out mankind is born. So after Adam and Eve leave,
Nope. Hang on. I think it just hang on. Yeah, you just went muted you for some reason. Oh, we did pre. What happened pre-show?
I might have bumped my microphone cable. Here on, let me make sure I got it plugged in all the way. There we go. Am
I
I
can
back?
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Apologies.
you're back.
Um, but anyway, that's why I stress the Gen 6 conspiracy as starting right there in those first few verses, because you have as Adam and Eve, they leave the garden. And now, okay, we've got enmity. You're going to work this corrupt land to the day you breathe your last, and you're going to populate this earth. There's also going to be a savior. Bible tells us in the New Testament that Christ was slain from the foundations of the earth, meaning that before God even said the words, "Let there be light," a redemption plan was already put into play because he knew what man was going to do. So Satan knows the redemption arc. He knows what's going to happen. So his initial thought was, okay, if because God has to be born of a virgin. It has to be born of the Spirit of God, or sorry, Jesus has to be born of a virgin, and he has to be born of the Spirit of God and the Spirit of man together, i.e., the Holy Spirit coming upon Mary, her conceiving and giving birth to Jesus. Well, his initial thought was, okay, if I can corrupt all of mankind's bloodline, so now no longer are they human, but now they're angel human, or they're more angel than not, then that means that Christ, when he's born, he's going to have to be born of an angel and man. He's not going to be born of God and man. He'll be born from a tainted bloodline. And so that was Satan's initial plan was, okay, I'm going to corrupt all flesh. I am going to make sure that there is no bona fide 100% human in existence anymore. That way, if Jesus is born, he won't be dying for the sons of God, or sorry, the sons of man. He'll have to die for the angels. But we know the angels are already immortal beings, so it doesn't make sense why he would have to die. The book of Jude, I'm going to jump forward, then I'm going to jump back. The book of Jude, it talks about the original angels who sinned. And it says, now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. The Greek word for dwelling is oikaterion. He has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example of undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. So when now jumping back to Genesis 6, people read, okay, the sons of God, they came into the daughters of men. What does that mean? Most people read that and they're like, oh, is this the line? Are we talking about the line of Seth here? Are these, because Paul refers to us, or sorry, Jude refers to us, and I believe also Paul refers to us in the New Testament as, hey, we're given now the opportunity to become sons of God. We are sons of God. And you and I, we could say, as Christian men, we could say, yes, boldly, we are sons of God. However, we are adopted sons of God. In the Old Testament, sons of God was only ever used to describe either angels or a being that was a direct creation of God himself. So Adam would have been a son of God, and then the angels themselves were sons of God. People kind of they have a tendency to miss that because on its face, the beginning of Genesis 6, it's a bit sci-fi, if you will. And a lot of
It
people they read
is.
it and they're like, the men of renown, Nephilim, what's going on here? And
What is it? Yeah, exactly. Who are these people, right?
yeah, they just gloss over it. All they really know from the Genesis 6, 7 to 8 account with Noah and the boat is that the earth was incredibly violent and God was upset he made people and wanted to wipe them all out. Well, between Cain and Abel's conflict, where Cain kills Abel, and this point here, there's been hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds of years have taken place to the point where the earth has become populated.
Mhm.
That word that I pointed out, oikaterion. Now, in the Greek, that word is in reference to a, a dwelling or a habitation of the body. It is of the body as a dwelling place for the spirit. So when Jude is talking there about the angels who left their own position of authority and they left their proper dwelling, the oikaterion is that essentially their outer physical abode that they had to shed in order to then copulate with the daughters of men. Um, and in doing so, the Bible never says this specifically, but I do believe there is a lot of credence to this. And I have this belief personally that in doing so, if it didn't make them mortal because of shedding their oikaterion, it did make them damned for eternity. Now, they were already damned for having fallen with Satan. However, the Bible talks about inside Jude, as I just read, those angels who initially sinned and shed their outer husk, their outer body to engage in sexual relations with man, those angels are being kept in chains, literally in Tartarus by Abaddon or Apollyon, whichever name you prefer, and they're being kept there until Revelation. They're being kept there until the end game. Now, those angels having shed their husks, they're as the sons of God. They shed their husks, they take up with human women. The men and the children that were born to those women, those were the men of renown. These are half human, half angel hybrids. The first, the first ones to exist. Um, most people, most scholars that I have looked up surmise that they would have had to xenomorph their way out of their mothers, being that they were so gargantuan in size. Um, and the nature of angels,
Oh, you went out again.
man, I gotta do something about this mic. I don't know what's going on. Apologies. Hold on. I'm gonna straighten it out here. I'll just keep an eye on that. Um, but if you look up Gary Wayne's his book Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and listen to some of his talks on YouTube, there's actually a really, really great train of thought that you can actually trace back through the Apocrypha and then through various routes of mythology, which explains more to the point what the Oikaterion was and what the ability of angels was in terms of how they could transfigure or transform themselves. We know that
Mhm.
Satan is described as being able to transform himself into an angel of light. Um, it would stand to reason that an angel could also transform itself into various forms to accommodate whatever carnal need it might have at the time.
Well, it sounds like, and this again, this is just what I'm gathering and what formulates in my imagination here. But what that makes sense to me is, look, you've broken away, you've abandoned God
Yep.
basically. So there's a purpose of, I mean, even if you think of home heavenly body as, or the Orchiterios that you're referring to, even if that just means leaving heaven, like you've sent your spirit out of heaven, and
Yep.
just the premise of that to me seems so insulting, right, to God. And then, you want to just have this host. Well, mankind as we know it, we know, is made in the image of God. Now, whether you want to interpret the image of God being spirit or whatever, God made us.
Yep.
And I am certain that the Lord of Lies, as we understand Satan to be,
Yep.
um, could probably create something that's similar, but he can never fully create what needs to be,
Yep.
um, would perfectly represent a human
Counterfeit.
being. It's
Yep.
all counterfeit, which would make sense if he's going off of, God, the great scientist, the DEA, and and all the things that make us up in a physical sense. That it would make sense that DNA would be, as like you said, corrupted. And how would Satan corrupt it? Well, if I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to make my guys bigger and badder because, I want to be better. I want to show everybody up,
Yep.
and I want to crush mankind. We're going to be bigger and stronger and just meaner and everything. And, we're killing our moms when we're born, and,
Oh
and how that
yeah.
comes. So there's definitely something to be said for that. And some credence based on, I mean, based on what you're saying here. So I think that's totally plausible. And I think that there's relevance there.
Oh yeah, and as you get further into the Old Testament, especially when you get to books like Deuteronomy and Joshua, when they're now coming into the land of Canaan, and those first spies go into the land, they come back with a negative report saying every single thing we saw there was a giant. We were as grasshoppers in our own sight, so we know we were to them. The first minefield that we see get laid down is, like I said, between that Cain having to leave, having that mark placed upon him, and then you have those hundreds of years in between where you've got this population on the earth being built up. You also have the sons of God. They've now shed their husks. They've now mated with the daughters of men. They've created the supermen, the men of renown, der Übermenschen, as Nietzsche might have put it. And so during that next time, as Adam and his wife are essentially building up their own family, Satan's doing the same exact thing. So that lead up to the flood, you've got not only has all flesh become corrupted, but because Satan knows that in order for him to be able to stymie and stop the work of God completely, people got to be killed off. So you've got just violence, 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 violence. Um, if you track down the writings of Enoch and you track down what is written about Enoch, there's two Enochs in the Bible: one born of Cain, one born of Jared. And one is evil, one is good. However, from them comes an incredible amount of knowledge. From them, we have the first harpazo, or the first rapture. But then that's where we get our 7 sacred sciences that are reported to have been given to Enoch, we'll call him Enoch the evil. And then those were given to him by the sons of God, which were then put into practice in the lead up to Genesis 6. So it's believed that the civilization on Earth at that time was so overwhelmingly advanced. We probably can't even wrap our minds around what kind of technology did exist back there. So you have this super advanced society full of angel human hybrids, very violent. And if they haven't already polluted the bloodline, their next best course of action is to kill whatever else has not been polluted. So God looks at the state of things. He's sorry he made mankind because they did exactly what he hoped they wouldn't, and they got the freak on with angels, and they're making these giant angel human babies. And so now he's
to
like,
to their disappointment, they wouldn't live to see the fruit, or maybe better that they didn't, but did not
yeah,
live to see the fruits of the labor, of the literal labor.
yeah, because whenever we've seen angels inside the Bible described, they're always described as being male. We Jesus talks about when they're having an argument of, hey, so this guy, his wife, he dies, but she marries, his 5 other brothers. So whose wife is she in heaven? He's like, oh, you idiots. We don't marry in heaven. Neither do the angels marry in heaven, because they're eternal beings. Why would they need to copulate and create offspring? Well, if they're not eternal beings anymore for shedding that husk, it's like, okay, well, now we've got to copulate. We have to carry on our gene pool. So it's, as I mentioned before, if Satan can derange himself and turn himself to look like an angel of light, it stands to reason that other angelic beings could also change their form. So if they weren't, if you could have had male presenting angels engaging in sex with women. You could have also had female presenting angels engaging in sex with men to create these hybrids. And then you've got, of course, male and female being born of these unions. So God.
Okay, you're out again, but it's not saying you're muted this time. See, I'm the one with the new mic. Shout out to my wife also. Whenever she listens to this, thank you again for the mic, and I'm glad that things are working for me well. All right, while he's having some technical difficulties, I'll go ahead and just kind of give some thoughts on this. I think this is, I mean, this is very compelling. What Eric is presenting here, and I think that, like I said, there's a lot to be said here, because when we're looking through Genesis, I mean, at least from a oh, I heard something.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh my God. So sorry about that. But please
You're
continue.
all right. You're all right. No, this is great. This is great conversation.
Um, let's see, where did I leave off there? I'm guessing I'll jump back 10 seconds and then I'll re-hit it. Apologies,
Okay.
my technical errors are.
And now now you're muted.
Okay.
All right. You're
All right, I'm just gonna keep my hand right here in case I see that mute go off. I'm gonna hit it. Oh my goodness. Can you hear me? Am I sounding okay?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right.
Thomas, I don't know enough about YouTube to understand super chats. But I'm sure once I get that set up, the intent for um for this channel was never to be a revenue generating thing. But since I know folks who have made successful careers, I guess, out of this. Sorry, I'm getting us kind of sideways, but I did see that pop up, and this has crossed my mind. I do know that there is the possibility, however far away, that I could possibly be monetized, or there could possibly be super chats. My idea behind that was that I was probably just going to give 90% of that away to various charities that I know that are at least in the local area. There's also a couple of other ones that I know that go overseas. Just people that I know who are doing things that I know the money would be most well spent. But I have not set that up yet, Thomas. This is still we're still very very much a
Just
new territory that
like
I'm getting
reach
in.
your hand. Thank you, baby.
But thank you, Thomas.
Oh, okay. My wife gave me my earbuds here, so just in case I go out again, I can just plug in and use just the Mac specific ones.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, what I was getting back at there, I also admirable to go the way of J.C. Penney. Tithe at 90%, live on 10. I like that. Um, but
Eh. It's Satan. We're talking about Satan. We're talking about his plans. And not we'll figure this out. And still nothing. But read them. Yeah. Folks, this is what I was worried about was actually going to happen to me, and that Eric would be sitting here going, look at this novice at YouTube trying to trying to get his act together. Um, and he's the voice actor. But you can listen to this and you can hear it. Eric's definitely got the better voice between the two of us. He has definitely got a voice for these presentations. We'll let him hold it.
Okay. Am I coming through?
You're coming through.
All right. I am going to. Am I still coming through?
Yeah, you're
Okay,
understand.
good.
You are coherent.
Oh man. All right. We're just gonna go with the earbuds here because this mic is, I don't know if it's dying or what. Well, thank you, Rode NT-USB. You did well for the few years that we knew ye. Gonna set you down here. There we go. All right. No more of that mess. But anyway, where I was, so I'm gonna say it real fast, just so I don't have to chance these now going out. Leading up to Genesis 6, you've got, like I said, that genetic minefield being laid out. So the first thing God looks at, he's like, I've got to take care of all this. I've got to kill everything off. There's one family with a spotless bloodline. I'm going to get them to safety, but they're going to have some repopulating to do. Plus, I need them to take care of all the species that are remaining on Earth. So let's grab all the fauna we can, all the insects, all the birds, all that, get them on the boat. So after that, you saw inside Genesis 6 there that it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterward. So a lot of people, they wonder, okay, well, if God killed off everything on earth in the flood, then how do we still have Nephilim afterwards? How do we still have...
That was going to be my next obstacle that I run into. And where I look at this and I'm saying, okay, to me, it's just like, if you take the metaphorical approach to the Bible, this isn't really much of a conversation here. There isn't really much of there doesn't seem to be like the plot hole that I reference it, because you're looking at it in a metaphorical way. But if you're taking it literally, and I do believe this in more of a literal sense, God says he destroyed everything except for what was in the ark, including Noah and his family. That means everything. He didn't mean most of the things, some of the things, everything except for, X, Y, and Z. No, he said everything. If you weren't in the boat, you were done.
Yep.
So that would mean, like what you're saying there, Eddie, in the chat, no Nephilim after flood. That would mean they should all be gone. At least everything on the earth. So where do we go from there? How do we? Again, we have references to the flood, to Nephilim still existing after the flood. So what happened?
So
How did they get back?
So the wording in the way God describes, or the way the Bible describes the deluge wiping out everything on the face of the earth is, and I'm borrowing again from Chuck Missler here, but one of the things he would always say about the Bible is that the wording is very, very specific. Um, Nothing is there by mistake, as Jesus even says, not a single jot or tittle will pass from the law before its completion. So both him and I maintain that anything left in is there for a purpose. Anything that's removed is there for a purpose. So we look at the specific wording. Pull up. Okay, so you have the Nephilim there before, Nephilim thereafter. But if we know everything got destroyed, then how is that even possible? So in Genesis 7:20-24, when we're talking about the flood killing everything, the actual specific wording is every living thing on the face of the ground. And we know that, save for Noah and his family that were on the boat, everything living thing, face of the ground, was killed. Now, being that we know that biblical wording is so specific, especially the Greek, we have to know that it says, although everything on the face of the ground was wiped out, it doesn't say anything about what was atop the water. To reference Gary Wayne again in his book, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, he actually posits in his book the following here. He says, what if safe havens not on the face of the earth were provided by dark angels? What if dark angels provided various arks and safe havens for other races around the globe? Perhaps a selected number of rebellious refugees additionally survived. Don't summarily dismiss the seemingly biblical contrarian hypothesis. Sorting out prehistory, the potential of others surviving the flood, and the Genesis 6 conspiracy is biblically consistent, but this jarring precept for many requires placidity for a short time. Now, given that we have, and we're still counting, given that we have over 500 flood myths the world over,
Oh
literally
yeah.
every civilization has flood myths. Not only do they have flood myths, but they have myths about giants getting off the boats that arrive at their shores.
That I wasn't as aware of, but I mean, to me, it was always the fact that the flood accounts are so propagated. Everybody goes, well, everybody's got a flood myth, everybody's got a flood story, and they're well, yeah, if it happened, everybody would. So,
Mhm.
I mean, and like, and not just when we talk about what happens with the line of Noah and his sons and how they populate the earth afterwards, it makes sense. If you've got these folks that are just they scatter, and I can't remember which exactly was it Japhites, Japhethites. Can't remember.
Probably the Hamites.
Yeah, the Hamite, because there's a million there's a million different tribes that come out of Ham, but
Oh,
they scatter. So yeah, they're gonna go end up in places like up the Nordic countries, or out in Southeast Asia, or in
yep.
in North America, all these different places, and yeah, they're all gonna bring that same account because they all come from that same experience.
Hmm. And if you're a person who subscribes to the hydroplate theory about how our continent went from being one giant one to having split in the wake of the flood,
Mhm.
then it makes a whole lot more sense as to why you would suddenly see giant bones of skeletons popping up in all kinds of countries where you see seemingly connected mountain ranges having once been a possibility are now separated by thousands and thousands of miles of ocean. And to that end, the question still lingers. Okay, so if everything was destroyed, say everything was destroyed on the earth, say even atop the water, say because given that the angels, we know that God, according to scripture, is at minimum a 10-dimensional being. We're able to enjoy 4 dimensions if you include time, but we're still very limited in what our mobility is. When you read descriptions of the throne room of God, we have angels or created beings that are moving in straight lines, and it seems almost as if it's describing light being refracted,
Mhm.
possibly shifting between dimensions as they move about the throne room of God. So I believe that angels are other dimensional beings. Like when you hear talks of alien
Yeah.
abductions, it's very, very likely, well, especially when you see videos of a ship that flies up in the air and then makes a right angle turn that's impossible to make, especially at those speeds. I believe you have the illusion of them shooting off into space, but what's really happening is they're crossing into their dimension outside of our realm of time and space. So if we know that there's the veil, we know that there's behind the veil of what we see and what we perceive. We know it's there, but we can't always experience it. So if angels are inside that spiritual realm, fallen angels as well, demons as well, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could kind of beam out to a separate portal during that time and then come back after the waters have abated off the mountains.
Right.
The other way around is okay, so we know that there was an initial fall of angels. We have 1/3 of the angels in heaven, they jump ship with Satan. Now, we know that some of the original ones, they copulated with human women and they're being held in chains. The Bible never says if every single one of the fallen angels decided to copulate at that one time. People have suggested, what if there was another fall? I don't know that there was another fall. However, if Satan was really hell bent on messing up the bloodline, and he at least strikes me as being smart enough to have a few contingency plans. If he had even the possibility that he knew a flood was coming to wipe out the earth, which if you get into the Apocrypha, you read the book of Enoch, there's actually a warning given to the giants specifically that, hey guys, rains are coming. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he would have said, okay, I want you guys, you select group of angels, you guys go ahead and you guys take this dive now. However, after the flood, oh crap, they've all been killed off. All right, next group, you guys go inside there, find some gals, knock them up, let's make some more hybrids. And we see the fruit of that happening inside the 400 years where Israel is enslaved in Egypt. That's 400 years that Satan has to build a minefield all throughout the land of Canaan. So that's, again, it's like, I don't think it has to have been a secondary fall, but it could have
Mhm.
been a secondary wave of fallen angels now shedding their abode. Because people mistake fallen angels and demons as being the same thing, but they're not. Um,
Well,
a
and
fa-
I think, and I live in my the translation that I have always used has always been the Niv. I like the New International Version,
okay.
just because I'm familiar with it. Right, that's my old touchstone.
Sure.
But what it says here is when he's talking about what he's saying he's going to do. We all know God does what He says, right?
Yep.
I like in what you wrote in the research that you presented me with. God isn't in the habit of making mistakes,
Yep.
right? Yeah. I'm going to bring into flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens. Every creature that has the breath of life in it, everything on earth will perish. Everything on earth will perish. Maybe there's a key note there that he's talking about things that he created on the earth. He's talking about perhaps that life. That life is what he's talking about because he's
Yep.
very clear later on and that every living thing that moved on land, birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swam on the earth, and all of mankind, everything on dry, everything had breath of life in its nostrils, died.
Yep.
It's all
And he
dead.
also, if you also do like I was saying before and get like really specific with the wording, the main thing there is he says, I will destroy everything that I have made. Well, he didn't make Nephilim. Angels and humans made Nephilim. So there's I want to say there's at least three ways that we have them existing before and after. Either one, they made boats of their own and they landed all over the world, which possible theory. Two, they were spirited away for a time, the water abates, they come back. Three, they have a secondary wave of copulation and we have them about. If if God says I'm going to kill off everything that I have created, well then that would lend some credence to them spiriting away and then coming back. Um, we know it wasn't all of them because we found giant skeletons the world over, and we find some that looked as though
Goliath.
that they, yeah, exactly. You have Goliath, you have him and his four brothers, you have Anak, Og, king of Bashan. You have so many giant beings that are actually referred to in the Bible. I believe there's about 22 named giants inside the Old Testament alone. And so many people don't even recognize that. So I think those are probably the most three plausible ways that they have existed into our current time.
Right. But again, we have to take that supernatural approach to
Yeah.
things
Yep.
because
And
again, believing that the Nephilim are that is to make that leap in logic to this is a supernatural being that has come in form, corrupted as it is, to corrupt man.
yeah.
Um,
And we also don't know what kind of technology they had access to. We also don't know what kind of powers these guys had. Like, we only see very, very limited instances inside the Bible where it shows an angel doing something supernatural. You have the two angels inside Genesis 19, where they blind this whole group of people that are there to, try and take them away, as it were, and have their way with them. We don't know how they blinded them. We just know that they did. We see angels take men by the hand, and we see, like with Peter, he's teleported out of the jail cell he's in. He's knocking on the door. He's like, "Hey, it's me, Pedro. Let me on in." To where the servant girl's like, "Hey, there's a guy named Peter here. I think It's like, okay, how did the angel take him there? Did the angel slip him through time and space? Did they just go really fast like the Flash? Was it literally like a blink, blink? Here you are. Did he
but
disintegrate Peter and rebuild him? In a
I
second.
always feel like the way my brain's always worked is like, well, they got all the cheat codes to the game, right? They just go like no clipping, right? And they just right
Yep.
through it. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm through here, or doing whatever. Because we live in this physical plane, and if you're outside it, I always assume that there's just certain things that you can do that just come with being outside of
Yeah.
being outside, having an existence outside that physical plane, and not being tied to it as we are while we are exist in this current existence
Hmm.
in our body.
Like, there's a really fantastic analogy, um, and it describes what a possible perception of God and his intellect and how he views all of time as being. And it's fantastic. It's like, imagine you're watching a parade, like the Macy's Day Parade. Okay, well, you can look down the street, you can see it coming, you can see it going, but you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it's going to. But imagine you're now in a helicopter several hundred feet off the ground. You can see the beginning of the beginning of the parade where it's over here. You can see where it's ending all at once. The people in the center, they're experiencing what's happening now. They've experienced all of that, and this is still to come. You know what's coming, you know what's already happened. You're able to literally enjoy it at every single stage all at once. It's like, imagine God observing time and our world like that. Is it possible that extra dimensional beings like angels and fallen angels could be able to enjoy the same kind of ability? Not that I think that they're omniscient, because I don't believe angels are omniscient.
No, I don't
Even
think so either.
the Bible says that Christ himself and the angels don't know the hour or the day of the end of all things. Only God has that knowledge.
Well, and I don't
Um,
think Satan would be as confident, or you know, the story of Job. I mean, Satan doesn't go into that little competition with God, knowing that he was going to be wrong about everything,
mhm,
and his assumption that he might be victorious would not be there if he had that precedent. And the
yep.
assumption here is that out of all the fallen angels, he is the most powerful. He is the leader of the group, and has that about him. Like, we're all kind of speculating when it comes to what exactly comes along with being an angel. But
Yeah. And what's really super interesting too, when you look into the timeline of the Bible in terms of the war that's happening throughout the whole Old Testament, it's about 90 instances where war is described inside the Bible. Within those 90 instances, there are several different battles that are taking place. When you get to the birth of Jesus Christ, um, of that percentage of war, there is the overwhelming majority of times that they're fighting against Nephilim tribes or Rephaim tribes, the human angel hybrids. Once Jesus is born, no more talk of war because Satan is already lost on that point. Crap. The Son of God was born of man and God. I can't win by infecting the gene pool anymore. So what's my next move? Okay, I'm going to kill him. Not realizing that he was going to, in effect, in having Jesus killed, complete the work of God. Okay, so now what's the next thing? Well, being that he couldn't stop redemption from happening, he couldn't stop Calvary from happening, he couldn't stop the raising of Jesus from happening, his next best thing is to literally kill off and take as many of humankind as he possibly can with him into damnation. Like, that's the whole next big point of it. And
Collection of souls.
yeah, and part of what's really, really creepy and really, really scary is the end of the Bible describes, you've heard talked about the days of Noah. Oh, and so the end times, it will be as the days of Noah. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's just going to be a violent time. People are going to be given over to free love again, only it's going to be like the 70s on roids. No, no, no. It's more, there's more to it than that. I maintain that, and a lot of biblical scholars maintain that the days of Noah is a direct reference to the corruption of the flesh on earth. And Jesus himself says, I myself cannot pluck you from my Father's hand. I cannot myself pluck you out of his hand. So it's like, once you've made the conversion in your heart, once you come to the knowledge of Christ, your sins are remitted unto him, you have now become saved. Once you're saved, you can't be unsaved. Um, you can lose your rewards in heaven. And not that like eternal life isn't a reward in and of itself, but we do know that we will be given rewards based on our actions, based on how we treated our fellow man, based on how we worship God. James stresses that. So you have Paul saying we're justified by faith, James saying, hey, you can also stock up rewards. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. So the only other way that, say you are saved, or say that you had the possibility of becoming saved, the only way to make it so that you cannot enjoy redemption, resurrection, and eternity with God is if you are no longer a creature that he himself died for. And that's if you are no longer human. So my contention is that the mark of the beast, it's not going to be a microchip under our hand. It's not going to be a vaccination that's got nanomachines that keep track of us. It's not going to be that. What the mark really will be is it will be you shedding your own humanity. It will be you becoming something else. And if we're talking days of Noah, like we can go down the rabbit hole on this one too, with like 23andMe and all these different find your family, find out where your roots are, doing these mouth swabs to possibly index your DNA to see what works best with fallen angel blood to create the next set of hybrids. I believe that that mark is going to alter people's DNA to the point where they're no longer human, because Jesus didn't come down to become a Nephilim and die for the Nephilim. He came down, became mortal man to die for man. So in shedding your humanity, oh sure, maybe you're going to gain some supernatural powers. Maybe you'll be the next Superman. Maybe you'll be able to levitate things, or see in the dark, or have X-ray vision. However, you have to sacrifice your humanity to do that, thereby making you no longer fit for redemption.
And there is science that's out there. You think of homunculi,
Yep.
not necessarily, and I immediately go to Full Metal
Yeah.
Alchemist.
Right.
The-
The imp in the flask.
yeah, but or yeah, Gene Stealer's Warhammer 40K, which I've got books about. I'm a big fan. Um, the but we talk about when we start to do things like playing God, right? When we think that science is starting to play God into it, where we start to alter genetics, when we're talking about using three genetic donors into one child as opposed to two, and we talk about homunculi, we talk about adding all this genetic manipulation, which really, when you think about it from the innocent standpoint, where maybe you want to pick and choose embryos if you're trying to do in vitro or something like that.
Designer babies.
To a degree, but again, you're not manipulating the egg, you're just choosing one out of the other. But is at the beginning of the slippery slope because we see that we're well, and you know, if we're talking about it and it's out in the open in the mainstream just a little bit, and you can just look on the internet, you see that there's probably places where with where darker, more sinister science is going on, especially when you talk about places like China,
Oh yeah.
where there is a one, there's an atheistic concept there, so there's no fear of God or no understanding that there's no real fear that of the dark side of the what actual evil is and evil beings. So you don't know possibly what you're doing. You're just saying, "Oh, well, I'm just doing it because it's science, and I love science, right?" And we can make a better world. And what you don't understand is what you're doing is you're corrupting something that's already perfect um, in its own intent. And what God created us was perfect,
Yep.
and we corrupted it ourselves. But now we're taking that corruption to a whole nother level because we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, and as we always say, how broken is our world right now that we aren't suffering the same fate as Sodom and Gomorrah did. But when you think about name city X or whatever in the United States, and you're like, that place is just a place of true corruption. We don't understand it to the point you can go into one of those cities and you can probably still find 50, 60 righteous people in there.
Hmm.
Literally, sample size is much, or the total size is much smaller. But
Yeah.
literally, the only one in Sodom was Lot. He goes, let me, and he keeps haggling them down on there. And you're like, well, let me just find, was it 10? Does he settle on 10 or 5? I can't remember,
10.
but it doesn't matter because the only one there ends up being Lot. And even his sons-in-laws don't make it out because they're like, haha, look at this guy.
Yup.
Um, he's upset because they're trying to rape the new guys. And so it ends up just being Lot. And Lot's not even really an inhabitant of Sodom. He lives in the suburbs of Sodom, I guess.
Yep.
It's
He
the
sits at the gate. He's like on the city council. He's one of these guys who helps out with all the infrastructure issues and whatnot.
right. And then he's like, I'm out of here, right? I'm all the way out of there. And to me, it's just like, yeah, we think we're experiencing corruption, at least in the United States as we see it, but how bad is it that pretty much every single man, at least, we're just talking about men here, that at least the men were entirely corrupted to the point where, look, there's nothing left to save. So there's no sense in crying about it. It's gone, right?
Yep.
Don't look back. And I think
And,
that's the harsh lesson if you're Lot's wife, specifically. But that's the harsh lesson that is there to be learned, because when God is throwing his true power out there, it is a sight that you are not supposed to witness. It is it's beyond us at this point.
yep. It's like
Um,
when he says go, do not tarry. You just have to go.
yeah.
Um, it's and this is going to be a grim for a lot of people to hear, but I believe it's the absolute truth. When you look inside the Old Testament and you see there's one Nephilim tribe or Rephaim tribe that actually makes a deal with Joshua. And it's the tribe that shows up and oh, we've got ratty clothing and our sandals are blown out. And look at our water skins. Oh my gosh, we've walked from forever away. And so they make a deal. Hey, look, you have our protection. No harm comes to you. And then they find out, oh crap, wait, we're supposed to kill you guys. But we made a promise and we swore this oath in front of God. So we will uphold that promise. Um, you had that group now allied with Israel. And because of that, God protected them. God watched over them. When they were later set upon by their fellow Nephilim tribesmen, you had Joshua and his boys show up there and go scorched earth on everybody.
You
So,
know,
like, even though this was a nation that God, for all intents and purposes, hated and despised and wanted dead, because they supported Israel, they had his protection. So, you look at the allies that Israel has. You look at the state of affairs here inside the US. You look at the things that people now engage in sexually, that it's unfathomable that people could sink to such levels of depravity. And you look at all of that and you hear what's described inside Sodom and Gomorrah as more or less a snapshot of the days of Noah, just complete derangement going on there. And God punished Sodom and Gomorrah with fire and brimstone, literally made the place completely unlivable forever. I think, and I do believe that the only reason why we haven't incurred a wrath along those same lines is because of our support of Israel. Because if we weren't, and if we don't get punished for our transgressions, God's going to have to go back to Sodom and Gomorrah and apologize to them. And so I think as long as we continue to support Israel as a country, we won't see that wrath.
I
But
don't. I mean, and I think this would be a great. I think this would be a great conversation on its own. But I think it is less to do with the political or national boundaries of Israel. Though do think the Holy Land itself is of significance to God. But I think that um, because there was a time where it wasn't Israel, and from the biblical times there was times that Israel was conquered and they were scattered.
mhm,
But also, I think it to me that when to face God's wrath in that sense would be more along the lines of how fully forsaken we have got to God. Because even if you look at even in places that are horrible with like toward or so anti-Christian or Jewish or any Abrahamic religion. We think of North Korea, we think of Iran, we
yep,
think of China, right?
yep,
There are movements within there that are that are basically the Christian underground, right? Where there is a movement down there. It's very dangerous, but you have those righteous people.
yep,
You have those God fearing people. But what happens? And I think that um, I think that that's when we as human beings thrive. I think it's when the Israelites thrived, and we see it in Judges when they're conquered and they cry out to God because they realize the mistake or they've been punished. That's when we're at our best, is when we've been kicked down.
yep,
Um, because the worthy folks are going to be the ones that pick themselves up and understand I screwed up, or my parents screwed up, or my grandparents screwed up, or whatever. I need to fix this in whatever way I can. Um, those folks are going to be there. But what happens when you have a culture that I think that unfortunately Western culture, which has done so much to propagate Christianity throughout the planet, has
mhm,
now gotten to this point where now it is where it's almost like a soft culling of Christianity. But we see the dip, and that's another thing, another discussion I'd love to have you on here when we talk about.
oh
And I'd
yeah,
love I'm thinking of I've got some other folks I'd like to reach out to just to have a kind of a panel where we kind of discuss, to decrease, because
that'd be,
there's still a lot of Christians out there, and I
oh
think
yeah,
that one of the things that the media at large does a good job of trying to hide how many believers there are out there. And there are a lot.
yep.
Um,
It's like if you think about to use kind of a funny analogy, but it's the movie A Bug's Life. When have you seen A Bug's Life?
it's been a while.
Okay, well, there's a scene where it cuts to the grasshoppers abode, and they're there at this little bar, and these two guys are having a conversation like, oh, come on, why don't we just go squash them? Like, what's one little ant gonna do? And Hopper, he's got this piece of grain. He goes, hey, let's pretend this is an ant, and he tosses it at the guy, and he's like, well, did that hurt? No, it didn't hurt. Throws another one. Did that hurt? Are you kidding me? And then he rips the whole jug out of the wall, and all those pile up and crush on them. I think there are a lot of people there that they do downplay, like you said, media specifically, because we know that they are not allied with the truth. We know that they're not allied with a heavenly message. We know that they are much like their father, the Prince of Demons. They're out there to steal, kill, and destroy. And what often gets stolen, killed, and destroyed is people's hope, is the truth that they have to hold on to. So they're able to paint this as, oh, it's a dwindling few that still cling to this other
The
world way
Right.
of living. When in reality, there is this storehouse of people that need to be given the push to step up and shoulder their own shield and sword alongside their brethren, for the Lord, as it were. And that's where we get our famous We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we war against principalities, powers, rulers of wickedness in high places. Like each of those are different rankings within the angelic world of either demons, fallen angels, and then the power that holds sway in regions. Like we're supposed to be having this war. We're supposed to be, but way too many Christians, they either receive because of the fear, or they don't know how to fight from their knees. They don't know how to fight from that position of power, which is their prayer life.
Well, I think that part of that is we live, we say that because of where we live. We know that there are folks out there in other countries who are fighting the good fight, right?
Yep.
The missionaries and the folks who are converts over there in places where it is hostile. But where we live and where both of us are broadcasting from, we have a very comfortable life, and it is and in many ways, God warns us about the worldly things because look, God knows it's a trap. Satan
Yep.
certainly knows it's a trap because and we as comfortable Christians are more inclined to not we're because we're content. We're not riled up as easily. Like even me, I consider myself kind of a feisty person, but me with you know a house and a wife and two kids and expectations and things that I've built around me, and I've got this life that I've spent my life building. A little bit more reticent to throw it all away at the drop of a hat. Where
Yeah.
at the same time, it's you know okay, there's a time and place for everything, but and so not asking you need to do that, but when is that point where you have to just throw your hat down and say enough's enough.
Yep.
Mhm.
It's why Jesus, he talks about this in the book of Luke. And it's like he doesn't mean this in an active sense, but I'll kind of clean it up here in a second. But he says words to the effect of, um, he who doesn't hate his own family is not fit to serve in my kingdom. And he's talking in a sense of the person who commits and says, I want to join, this army for the Lord. He cannot then turn back and put his hand to the plow again. It's like once you've committed, you must go fully. And it's not hatred in the sense of you have to actively hate your parents, but it's hatred in the sense of you have to be willing to, if you know that your love for them will keep you from doing what you're called to do for God, you have to be willing to cut that off. You have to be willing to go with your creator. But it is, man, it's hard. It's so
Oh,
hard.
yeah, it'll get even harder too because those concepts and everything, but at that point, you can Satan can use loved ones as hostages even in that sense.
Yup. Oh
Because
yeah. Well,
look,
and it's like that's why Jesus said, he goes, don't think I came to bring peace. I came to bring a sword, dividing one's son against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A person's enemies will be within their own household. Like that's how hard he is on truth, because truth is immovable. It cannot be changed. It cannot be bent. The truth is. And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So that immovable, inflexible, exclusive truth will remain. And so it's like, okay, you know what this truth is, and if you really want to bear your cross, you're going to have to be ready, willing, and able to have a divide, even as intimately as separating you from a parent or a sibling or your next of kin. Like it's I I like to say there are no shades of gray within the Bible. There's either white or black. Here in the US, yes, we have these lovely shades of gray where we can kind of be 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But the Bible tells us anything not done from faith is in fact sin. And again, to paraphrase, it's like if you're not for me, God says, then you're against me. You're clearly for the enemy. And so it it hits hard. There's a really fantastic song. I think Ray Bolt sang it, but it's called For the Sake of the Call. And the chorus is, we will abandon it all for the sake of the call. No other reason at all but the sake of the call. But the sake of the call. Wholly devoted to live and to die for the sake of the call. And to live that out, I'm sure some people would look at that as being zealotous and be like, wow, you can't get along with so and so. Oh, you've excluded them from your life. Well, I'm told, what fellowship can darkness have with light? It can have none. I'm told not to take up with a man who's given to fits of rage, lest I learn his ways and become like him. It's like God's going, yeah, I know this is hard. That's why I gave you these 613 laws. That way I could show you just the length of your depravity and the length of your sin. That's why we have to have a savior. And that's why grace is stressed so hard in Romans 6, because yeah, you're not going to be able to keep all this. I recognize that. You're not going to be able to keep all this, but I still want you to try.
Yeah. Well, not only that, it's just look, there's something better along the way, and that all comes into the faith. Even and we were talking about faith before the show started. Was the Israelites having faith? It's like, look, you've got all these things. It's gonna get better. You just have
Yeah.
to
Oh
believe me.
man. It's like, and people say, they're like, oh boy, if I could just see a miracle, I could believe. Yeah, sure. Yeah. You and
Well,
the other
I
million
know
people.
I'm the worst person with that because, like I said, it's like, look, if I saw all this stuff happening in front of me, yes, I'd be probably a lot more attentive, because no one was turned into a pillar of salt before me. No one was struck dead, for what was it? Did somebody accidentally touch the Ark of the Covenant when they weren't supposed to one
Yep.
time?
Yep.
Dead, dead. Like, this is how serious things are. You see it right every time. Look, and I'm gonna have a grand time when I get to the part where Moses goes up on. I leave for how long, and I come back, and you can't stop worshiping a golden cow, or you can't.
Oh my.
We don't even have
Yeah.
we haven't even made hamburgers yet. It's not even a dish to be happy about. We don't have steak, but
Yep.
um it's an example of how easily we can slip into, um it is how easily we can slip um into sin. But
Yeah. And even even our founders recognize that. Like Benjamin Rush actually talked about, outside of a outside of a construct, sorry, outside of a way of life born of Christianity and Judeo-Christian values, he sees no way that a civilization can survive but fall to utter despotism. And what what we saw inside the Old Testament, like you said, with these people that were flawed, they gave us again and again and again and again and again a model of what not to do and what to do. We got to see literally every single issue of the heart lived out in the good book, and we get to go, oh, I can learn from their example. Um, there's the table of how a nation runs is almost 100%. I believe it's like this across the board for every nation. And given that we've had a constitution that's lasted over 200 years, the average length of time for a constitution to last inside a nation is 15 years or less. So we're already way ahead of the game. But the way the cycle of a nation will go is, you go from slavery to freedom, freedom to prosperity, prosperity to abundance, abundance to complacency, complacency to apathy, apathy to dependence, dependence back into slavery. And
it's kind of like the good men create good times, times create weak men create hard times, and hard times create that
yep.
cycle. And I think that, we talk about, like, Western culture really propagating Christianity. The U.S. is, as a area of natural resources, a cornucopia of just everything you could ask for. Think about where God put the Israelites in the land of Canaan, the promised land. That was, to me, it's just like, okay, yeah, that's the original covenant
Hmm.
with the Jew with the Hebrews, and that became the Jews and everything. Now we see the Puritans, and a lot of Protestants, a lot of just other just God fearing people coming across to the New World. Yes, there was a lot of greed and a lot of
Hmm.
exploitation for whatnot, but what we've had is that we founded a nation from God, which is in our Constitution, and we've been very blessed. I think beyond the expectations of any other culture, any other
Oh yeah.
nation. It's just because we have so much, and we have been able to up until, I think, recently, do it in a flawed way, but at the same time trying in a way where the community is still rooted in in God, where
Eh,
churches are a mainstay of the culture, and
yep. And
it's
that's
only now that we seem like we're getting away from that way of life.
yeah, and honestly, that's such a great segue into like the next little bit that I want to touch on, and that's you had you had Israel. They had after the floods wiped out what they thought was all flesh. Then they prosper. You have Abraham comes on the scene. You have Isaac, Jacob, you have Joseph. You have just this huge boom for Israel to the point where they're more numerous than even the Egyptians are inside the land of Egypt. You know, they've got the, the
I was talking about this because we just got it. I just got into that part of the reading, and I'm like, man, it's almost like the Bible's talking about them like they're pests. It's like this
yeah,
place is
right.
lousy with Hebrews. Egypt's just lousy with them. They're just crawling around like it's a roach or a rat
Right.
infestation. At least that's how the Egyptians are looking at us. Like, man, they're everywhere. We got to do something about these. Let's make them slaves.
Oh, and like not only that, but you got Joseph is literally the second most powerful man
Oh yeah.
in the known world. And then in the wake of his death, in the wake of that Pharaoh's passing away, you have a non-Egyptian take up the now mantle of Pharaoh, and then they're put into that slavery for those 400 years. And it sucks. It's hard. They're still clinging to their God, but they're pretty well convinced that he's forgotten them. And so Moses shows up, this old boy, the sandal-clad Batman with a stick and a stutter, and
Mhm.
he's able to, with God's power, liberate Israel. Okay. Well, those 400 years that have gone by, as I mentioned before, you've got all these tribes in Canaan that are now being rebuilt back up. Either a secondary wave of angels have shed their outer husk to now engage with human females, or you have the ones that were in existence who possibly survived the flood now coming back and they're now engaged. You could say, okay, well, if the land of Canaan was marked out already as being the site where all these Nephilim were residing, and this is supposed to be where Israel was headed to, we know that that was promised to Abraham back in Genesis 15. God promises, your children will essentially take up residence in a land not their own. They're going to have to subdue all the nations there, but it's going to be the land of Canaan. So Satan knows, okay, I've got to get there. I've got to go right there and take over. Well, God flat out says to Israel, don't have anything to do with the Moabites. No, the Moabites were born of the tribes of Lot. So you had the Abrahamic tribes, then you had his nephew Lot. He says, have nothing to do with them because they didn't even greet you with bread and water as you were making your way out of Egypt to the promised land.
They
So
also come from probably problematic stock, considering what happens at the end of the account of Sodom and Gomorrah,
yes, and
which
not
kind of
only
just drops right there. It's just kind of like, oh, whatever happened
yep,
to that? Oh, no, we apparently later on they're the Moabites.
yeah, and not only that, but they're residing in a land and they're already intermingling with various Nephilim tribes, specifically the Amorites and the Amalekites. They took up with them. So they're already in an infected gene pool. God says, Israel, nothing to do with them.
So
They're now heading into the land of Canaan, and they had all this tradition that they could cling to. They had God that they could cling to. Well, now it's like they're having to relearn it all over again. They went from being slaves to all the way up to apathy, dependency, then back into slavery again. And now they're having to start their second cycle all over and they're having to learn how to be dependent on God. And so, like, when it comes to even the book of Joshua and and leading up to Joshua in Deuteronomy, where Moses is leading them, God flat out says, look, I'm going to let these guys attack you because I have to have my people become a warlike people. And so he's like, look, it's going to be rough. It's going to suck, but you have to go through this because I need you to be tough old boys and gals out here because this land's going to eat you up.
yeah,
And
and
when they go in,
they don't talk about it as much, but you get the impression through Genesis that maybe not Isaac so much because Isaac seems to be a very peaceful dude, but Abraham, you know, scared of the Egyptians though he is, he seems to be able to take care of himself in a way.
yeah, a lot of
Well,
people
I
think
mean,
that,
he does some warlike stuff um, in that whatever Battle of Five Armies thing that goes
yeah,
on.
318 trained mercenaries born of his own tents. Like people
Laying
think,
waste.
oh yeah, Abraham's out here. He's just a humble sheep herder. No, Abraham was probably the richest man on earth at the time. Like, you're talking about a guy who has to take days just to make sure he's driving the cattle to wherever it is he's going. And it may only be a day's journey away. It's like he had so much wealth and so many resources. Like,
He outgrew Canaan. That's to the point where the Canaanites like, "You can't live here anymore. We you were
yeah,
there's too
not
much
only
there's too much of you."
oh yeah, not only that, but when you have the posterity of well, I guess it would have been, let's see, it would have been, was it Joseph? Hold on real quick, I gotta refresh myself real fast. You have, oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember which, was it the king was in, hold on, it's coming to me. Okay, you have the second happening of war inside Genesis 34, and that's between the Hivites and the posterity of Israel, and it's because the of the of Israel, their sister Dinah was raped. And so these guys show up and they convince these guys, hey, we
Oh,
wanna take up with you. We wanna
yeah,
let's
this is
form
a
a
great
collaborative effort, but y'all gotta be circumcised.
yeah,
And so they're like, cool, yeah, let's have a circumcision party. And then they murder all these people. And what does their father say when they get back? He's like, oh my gosh, you're gonna make me a stench to the people who live here. We can't have this. Like, these are Canaanite tribes. Like, they're gonna come back and eat us.
right. And they got and Jacob, he still sounds salty about it at when he's at his deathbed because he brings it back up. But I love their response, it's like because and maybe that's me because I relate more to Peter. I'm the guy who always feels like, if they were trying if I was with Jesus's posse and they were trying to take him away because I knew he was going to be crucified, and even though I'm still going to be angry about it, I'm still going to want to go up and do something. I'm still going to let my temper get the better of me
Yep.
and want to lash out. I very much relate more to was it Levi and was it Levi and Simeon? I can't remember.
Yep. Levi and Simeon.
Yeah, and just go. Well, what were we supposed to do? Just let them have their way with our sister? No, no, we're not doing that.
Yep.
Especially if they are aware of what's going on with Nephilim at that time, which they're probably much more aware of it than even we are trying to study it.
Mhm.
Um, they're probably like, no, we're not going to let this happen because this is corrupting.
Oh yeah.
No,
And
we're
like, think
gonna
about it. It's
make
like,
them we're gonna convince them to cut their foreskins off and hit 'em while they're down.
yeah, it's like maybe that was literally the only way that they could have killed them. But you think about this too. It's like, why did Abraham feel the need to have 318 trained mercenaries? Was it possibly that they were literally living in a minefield of these gigantic otherworldly beings and they had to have guys who knew how to just bring death at a moment's notice? Like, I think that's more plausible to me than a belief that he was just some old boy with a pack of sheep and a tent and a
Well, it
housemaid named Hagar.
I think that especially back in those days, you just had to be able to protect yourself.
You
And if
did.
to be successful like Abraham was, you don't have to just lie about your wife being your sister and get a bunch of goodies from the Egyptians. You have to be able to protect those goodies once you're giving it to them. And I think
Yep.
that, like I said, we see a little bit with Abraham. You don't really hear about it much with Isaac or Jacob so much, but it seems like it's there. It seems like
Yeah.
it's there, and that I mean, because look, we look at it and we can you know, go back to right after Noah gets off the boat, and they start talking about the Semites, which
Yep.
with Shem, but then the real focus of the Nephilim seems to center around Canaan, and it sounds to me like there is something that Canaan does. Like we know, and
Yes.
you are not the only person who's told me because one of the confusing parts is the account of Noah and Ham when Noah has a little bit too much to drink one night, passes out. We've all been there, at least I have. But nothing's happened to me like what's happened to Noah apparently. But the story from the American trying to read a translation, you're like, oh, is Ham found his dad naked and looked at him, and that corrupted him? No, and then you realize that there's more context to that.
Yeah.
There's a connotation that something nefarious sexually was done with him, um, and that's why that's understanding why Noah is pissed when he regains consciousness,
Oh
but he
yeah.
doesn't really yell at him. He yells. he curses Canaan, and Ham has 4 sons that they account, but he focuses on Canaan. So what is it about Canaan,
Yep.
which probably is a topic for another story, but he for some reason Canaan is the source, really. I mean, Ham kind of spark is the spark, but Canaan seems to be the line that it comes out of,
Yeah. Actually,
and even
let me hit on that real quick, and then I'm gonna jump into these tribes. But we're told inside the Bible that Adam used to walk with God in the cool of the day. We're also this would be another great topic for discussion too. But you have in our current day and age, we have astrology. Oh, what's your sign? Are you an Aries? Are you an Aquarius? You a Capricorn? What have you? Well, that all stems from the original Jewish zodiac, which is called the Mazzaroth. And what the Bible tells us with regards to the stars is that every single one was hung there by God Himself. Every single one of them has a name. And then through studying the Mazzaroth, we actually find out that in the stars, the entire story from the birth of the world to the end of all things is told in the stars. And so I believe that you had Adam, he had otherworldly knowledge and understanding from literally talking with God. I believe that Adam was told by God, what was going on in the constellations. And I believe that that probably passed on by word of mouth to Noah, because you'll notice that when God says, all right, Noah, go get 2 of every unclean animal, and I want you to get 7 of all the clean ones. You never see anything talked about that denotes what a clean animal is until the book of Leviticus. It's like, how did Noah know this? Well, it's very, very possible that they knew that story from the stars. God had hung that there for them so they could say, okay, things are going to get bad, but you've got a redeemer coming. So it's quite possible that Noah knew in advance Canaan's going to be a problem. So I'm going to curse Canaan right here and now because I know that he's going to be this thorn in Israel's side eventually coming up.
yeah. Well, and it's saying like Noah and Abraham are very similar in the side. Like God says something and they go, okay. It's not a whole lot of back talk. It's not like Moses, oh, do somebody but me, or Gideon. We're not Gideon.
Oh, poor Gideon.
Barack.
Oh, sure, yeah. Okay, well, hey, not only are you going to win the war, but it's going to be at the hands of 2 gals.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
Barack.
yeah, exactly. Like that's God effectively pulling your man card at that point.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Uh,
And with all that, so like you have that curse leveled on Canaan, and then we see from his tribe all these other tribes start springing up of these Nephilim or these Rephaim creatures, and there's a number of different ways that people interpret what's going on with this repopulation of the land of Canaan, but it goes back to those 3. Either some angels survived outside of our time domain. We had some survive inside boats and just happened to start a new civilization wherever they were, or we had a resurgence of more angels shedding their outer husk to get it on. Well, if you've got all the Moabite tribes there, they have plenty of time to do all that to make more offspring. But then you've got through the line of Esau, you have him taking up actual, I guess you could call them Gentile brides, which he was not supposed to
well,
do. He took up Gentile.
specifically, hang on, I've got it here somewhere because I was right before. Where was Esau with Jacob? Let's see if I can pull it up here. Oh yeah. Um, when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite. And I
Yep,
remember Hittite being Hittite is a Canaanite tribe.
yep,
And I always used to call it base math, with the Seamoth or whatever her name was. But 2 Hittite women, and we see that when Jacob takes Esau's blessing, which is kind of like an explanation right ahead of time. Um, which like again, if you're like coming from me and you're not understanding so much the connotations of the Nephilim as you're explaining it, it kind of like, okay, well, he just married some Gentiles, right? And then Rebecca says to Isaac, I am disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. Um,
yup.
it
It's
is
like,
it is it is a source of great pain to both Isaac and Rebecca that Esau is. is involved with these women, and he's having
Yeah.
kids, and he's very prolific. He's incredibly
Oh yeah.
prolific with them.
Well, because like at that up to that point, God had always maintained that the out of any group of brothers, the one who opened the womb, that is the one who's supposed to have all the blessing. But you see him here have to give it over to Jacob because Jacob didn't corrupt his own bloodline. And God had to have Jesus born of a pure bloodline. So then you see later on in Egypt when sorry Joseph is sorry Jacob is handing out blessings. He is going to bless Joseph's two sons, and instead of giving the blessing to like the main blessing to the first son, he swaps his hands over, and he gives the main blessing to the second born, and the secondary blessing to the firstborn. So like we see God kind of pull a couple of audibles. I believe that was also to preserve that bloodline, because then when you see them get into Canaan, um, there's all these tribes just waiting for them. Most of the websites out there that have done research into the Nephilim tribes and the Rephaim tribes, they list like 36 tribes, and they go down the list and like, oh yeah, this, and this. Through all the research that I've done, I've been able to cut that down to more like 29 tribes because a few of them, um, they just don't check out. But the big heavy hitters that they end up running into, they run into the Amalekites, the Anakim, the Hittites, just the same namesake Canaanites. They run into the Avims or the Philistines, and then they run into the Gibeonites. And like these are tribes that they're so bad that God knows full well, all right, I'm sending my children into here. I know their proclivity for mucking this whole situation up. I know their bent to screw up the moment they're not supervised.
Yeah.
I can't chance that. These tribes of Canaanites, they have got to go. Every man, woman, and child. And so you have going into the book of Joshua, and then later into the book of Judges, you have going to Joshua what many of us who have studied this refer to as the Nephilim Wars, where Joshua, he's one of two guys who comes back in Deuteronomy with a great report, him and Caleb, and they're like, dude, we can go there right now today and take this whole place. Like,
Yeah.
let's go get them.
Look, I can
And
take
so,
the walls down with a horn with some
yeah, like
musical
we're
instruments.
gonna march around it a few times, and we're all gonna shout, and this whole place is coming down. But even from that, you have Rahab, the harlot, because of her protecting the two spies that Joshua sent out to go take a look at Jericho. This is the first big battle that that Joshua has with the Nephilim tribes. Because she watched over them and she made a covenant with them, she ends up being a direct part of Jesus's direct lineage. Like she's blessed with that because she watched over those two spies that were sent in. So like the the web that God has in order to get his people where he needs them to be and have the right connections happen, it's like it blows the mind.
Right.
And even through all that, you've got Joshua now just kicking ass and taking names all throughout the land of Canaan. And still, every time they wipe out a tribe, it's like they're blessed incredibly prosperously. God says, in almost every single instance, burn everything to the ground. All the cattle got to go. Every man, woman, and child, you've got to wipe them all out. There's only a few instances where he offers servitude to some of the people, some of the tribes inside the land of Canaan. But it's oftentimes it's you're going to put them to forced labor, and more often than not, they're not supposed to form any kind of alliance or even take slaves of the pure blood Canaanite tribes because God knows they're going to be a stumbling block to you. And so when
And
Joshua reaches the end of his days, he's like, all right, boys, I can't carry this on anymore. I've cut them down to this last little remnant. You guys got to go out there and finish them off. And unfortunately,
they never do. They never do.
they don't
And
do
that
it.
and so we see that, but and where we see that more from Moses forward, right?
Yep.
When we talk about so Rahab's got to be Rahab's got to be a somebody who is not native to Canaan because she could not be a Canaanite and be pure if she's going to be in that line of Jesus.
Yep.
She cannot be a Canaanite. But we do have other instances where there is peace, friendship, and some sort of understanding between God, God's people, Abraham. Even Abraham, he lives with the Hittites for a while.
Oh
And
yeah.
they seem to get along just fine for the most part, and even to the point where, he buys his burial plot for them, and they're just gonna give it to him, and like, "You're a prince among us." Now is that Hittite politics just trying to are they trying to butter Abraham up to be more amenable to him or not? I don't know, but it seems like they're on good terms, and um, there are just points like that where it's just like, okay, and then there's also the point where it goes, okay, so you've got all these tribes, and for the most part they were wiped out, but not all the way, right? And they never get rid of them. So
Yep.
what happened to the Nephilim is, and I don't want this live stream's going great, but again, it does have to end eventually. But
Yeah, yeah.
I guess the way to start tying it all together is, um, we know that throughout we just never are able to the Israelites are never able to tie them up. So what happened to the Nephilim? Are they because we've got reports of them and findings of giants and giant skeletons in North America, but we
Yep.
don't necessarily in other places of the world, but we don't necessarily see giants walking around these days. But at the same time, if the line of if the line of Canaan really just propagated throughout the earth, or line of Ham propagated throughout the earth, then that would mean that the Nephilim blood is everywhere. Does that mean that really us as Gentiles, or is there something corrupt in us? Or
Very excellent question. Um, so my wife, she is really big into like looking up her family tree and her family heritage. And she's found more recently that she is actually or she's descended from some of these Scion lineages or some of these Canaanite lineages. There's a big reason why, when the disciples were given their Great Commission, why they were told not to go to Asia just yet. There's a big reason why, because a lot of these tribes ended up inside Asia, specifically in China. Other ones went up into more northerly countries like Greenland and Iceland.
well, that's where the
Um,
most of the people are too nowadays.
yeah. So with the idea of having potentially that kind of corrupt blood in us, there's a couple things. We know inside the Bible that a bastard was not allowed to enter into the congregation, the collective of their other fellow tribesmen, until the 10th generation. So we see you have Judah. He ends up sleeping with what he thinks is
Yeah,
a ritual prostitute, ends
right.
up being his daughter-in-law. From him, you have Perez. Now, you go all the way on down the line, you get to Ruth and Boaz getting hitched. Somebody's like, "Hey, may your tent be like that of Perez." And if you knew Perez's story, you'd be like, "Yeah, up yours, buddy." But from that entire line, you go all the way to David. David is the 10th generation, and he's the one who gets made king of Israel. Um, there's also another passage which talks about the iniquity of the fathers being visited upon the children up into the third and fourth generation. It's quite possible, and I don't, because I know that God talks about life being in the blood. It's possible that it takes 3 to 4 generations to dilute that blood enough to then be able to say, okay, it's more human than angel, or more human than Nephilim. Now you're back to being um, redeemable. I'm not quite sure.
I don't,
There's
to be honest with you, I mean, because God is, I mean, and we can see through the miracles of Jesus. Um, God might not even need to I mean, can operate over whatever rules he sees fit, determines fit. So
absolutely
it could be
he's
because there's a point, right, where he goes, "Look, you are no longer going to be held back by the sins of your father." So maybe that's the point, saying with like, "Look, we are," and maybe that was part of the point, but the example of Christ being and the act of Christ being crucified on the cross. Maybe it's like, no, everything is clean now. This is and perhaps that's why we don't um, see the Nephilim anymore, really, or do we? I don't know. It's like I said, because I mean, you could go down a there. You could go down a whole rabbit hole, like you said, of like how many people out there are really pod people, because there's some people that just don't seem to have any humanity in them,
oh
and
yeah,
some of that
and
might be our own prejudices against them, but I think that they're legitimately people when especially when you talk about sociopaths
oh
or
man,
folks who just lack any sense
yup.
of moral compass or standing. They're just corrupt individuals.
Yeah, they literally delight in iniquitous activity, and that's that for a while there, that became the modus operandi of Israel. Like all throughout the book of Kings, it's just one bad dude after another. The northern kingdom goes from bad to worse, and the southern kingdom isn't much better. But at least they had Josiah, who came in and was like, you know what? Up yours, all you bad people. Not only are we going to kill you all, but we're going to rebuild this temple. Let's go find all the old implements. Let's go dig up the scripture. We got to have this back on the table again. So to your one question, like what happened to the Nephilim? What happened to the Rephaim? Like I said, we see them really, really heavy all throughout the Old Testament up until Jesus is born. And it's like, okay, well, shoot, we missed our chance. You know, we got the Son of God born here, of man and God. Now what? Well, like I mentioned before, I believe Satan's next big plan, since he couldn't stop the birth of Jesus, he couldn't stop the crucifixion, even though he was the one who was trying to hasten it, not realizing that it was going to be his own undoing. He couldn't stop the resurrection, and he couldn't stop the church booming. Next thing is, okay, anybody who knows, you know, this is back, let's call this like, say 46 AD. In his mind, he's going, okay, any of these people around right now who knows the scripture, Josephus included, anybody around here, they know exactly what I was up to. They know what I was up to for that last 4,000 to 5,000 years. So they're probably going to figure I'm going to try and do the same thing again, only because Jesus has already been born, died, and raised to newness of life. Now I've got to be content with just killing as many people as I can, with just wiping out as many people as I can, because he knows that it grieves God, as God
Oh
says it's
yeah,
not.
that to me that would be like the biggest thing. Like
Yeah,
what is the best way to get to a father is
kill
to
his
go
kids.
after his kids.
Yep, because
And
he knows every single one is just a nail in God's heart. Because God says it's not my will that anyone should perish. So Satan's like, well, get ready for the pain, Lord. Um,
what would hurt me more, me you killing my kid or you turning my kid against me to the point where there is no more relationship to be had. And again, if you believe in a hereafter, I might lose my kid. Um, but but the hope is I will see him at the end and we will be reunited.
yep,
If you turn him against me, there's nothing at that point.
yep,
There's an ending. There's a finality there. I mean, and that's painful. Like I said, and that's like I said, being a parent is the best way to put God and the faith into
oh
perspective
yeah,
because you can watch it happen with your kids
yep.
from the beginning. Like we talked about the Israelites. I can't leave you alone for 1 second without you screwing up. Can't say kids as toddlers. I can't close my eyes just to take just a 5-minute power nap, and I wake up and you're trying to stick a fork in
Yep.
an electrical socket or something is going to burn a house down.
Yeah, it's like I love Ben Shapiro about a year ago. He was like, my son's an idiot. I leave him alone for 2 hours, he's dead. The same kind of thing here. And so the question of, okay, so where did they go? What happened to them? Well, you have I can dig up the maps for you and send them to you. It's really super
Okay.
fascinating. And again, like I can't recommend this book enough. Try and get a physical copy of this if you can. It's all over like Barnes and Noble, Amazon. But Gary Wayne has done such a fantastic job of tracking down where those lines went afterwards and what they've been up to. There was a humongous dispersal from around Upper Africa. It went into Asia, into what is now Germany, up into Russia, and then from there you have a ton of them. Some one of the tribes known as the Blackheads would have come through South America, up into Central America, and then up into North America. So a lot of the original Indian tribes, or First Nation tribes, if you want to call them that, here in the U.S., were descended from those same lines, to the degree that they were super warring with each other at an age of conquest. Certain tribes feared what they called the Star People, or the six-fingered giants.
Mhm.
The giants they described had like red hair, red beards. Were just actually Buffalo Bill has in one of his journals.
I caught
It,
that in your writing, in
yeah,
the research you've done.
it's so interesting to see. Like they bring out this femur that's 3 times the size of a normal man, which is putting this guy at about 18 to 19 feet tall. And the Indians are like, yeah, these dudes can outrun our horses. They can run alongside of a buffalo, pick it up, rip a leg off, and eat it as they're running. Like this is insanity. So all throughout the Old Testament, when you see, or I should say, mainly when you see Joshua taking over and heading up this war against the Nephilim, a lot of times they're fighting up in mountainous areas. Um, when you see groves of Asherim, the phallic symbols that represented Astarte and Baal and Moloch, they're in high places. The high places literally referring to like the tops of mountains, caves inside the mountainous areas.
I
So
have the
they're
high
having
ground, Anakin.
you cannot do it, Tanakin. So they're having to go up there and they're having to fight on this upper turf. So there's and we know that there is an immense network of caves, an immense network of tunnels below America and other nations abroad. One of the prevailing theories is that you had a lot of them literally recede back into their mountainous dwellings and caves. Out inside like the Iraq Iran area, there's a ton of different interconnected cave systems there. Also inside in Antarctica, we know that there's an ocean there that is gargantuan, and there's what's literally you could almost equate is to being like an under the ice biodome there. And so there's a belief that a lot of these tribes have gone either underground or up to these high regions. And if you get into like the whole Georgia Guidestones, you get into the globalist agenda, and you know that they want to reduce our entire population to 500 million people, and that's it. Well, all those old lines, all those ancient societies, all those secret societies, those all go back to the original ancient and secret societies known as the serpent societies, and those were born directly of the Nephilim and the Rephaim. So if you put all that together, you have, I guess, what you could call the shadow government, the world elites that are actively working with the posterity of Canaan, and they're trying to not only build their ranks, but they're trying to build that perfect Aryan line again, because the Aryan line is a psionic line of the Nephilim. That was what Hitler was after. He was trying to get so into the arcane that he could bring about what Nietzsche described as der Übermensch, the Superman, the one with powers, the one who is going to be the hero of old. Not the hero in the sense that I say today, but the hero as in I am terrifying because of the power I
Yeah,
possess.
that's a terrible. I feel like that's a terrible translation in the Bible. Or it's just a terrible, you know, just some things don't translate well. But when
Yep.
you hear the heroes and mighty men of old, you're thinking like, oh, these guys were great. They were look,
Yep.
angels are great, right? And
Yeah,
they had
God's
kids,
great.
and these kids were heroes, right? These are the Superman. And Supermen
Yep.
are on the other end. And when it really in reality, it's like, no, no,
Yeah.
this is abomination, right? And this is not kosher
Yep.
to God.
So like the big prevailing belief among pretty much the big heavy hitters that did research into this area, like Chuck Missler being in there, Gary Wayne being in there, Michael S. Heiser, who actually has another fantastic book. It is The Unseen Realm. Holy crap. So good. Get both these books. But the prevailing theory that a lot of them espouse is that the ones who weren't fast enough to get away, those are the ones who got picked off. Those are the big skeletons that we see, like up in New York, where they found this mass grave, and not a single one of the skeletons was under 7 feet tall.
Mhm.
Those are the ones that is survival of the fittest. They just weren't that fit.
Yeah.
The rest of them, the big belief is that they have receded back to the darker corners of the earth, and they're reamassing. They're working on their technology. They're trying to create that perfect bloodline again. And that's why I mentioned before, and this is definitely conspiracy theorists, but with all like sites or companies like 23andMe, where you've got to swab your mouth to send them some DNA so that they can then look into your bloodline. Um, Even possibly with getting your nose swabbed to test for certain viruses, and having to then give over your DNA. Like, what happens to all those swabs? Are those possibly being indexed? Are they looking for what DNA will mix properly with that fallen angel blood to make the next, what they would call the next perfect being, the
Well,
gods of old?
that fits in with some conspiracy theories as well that talk about the collection of DNA and whatnot. And I know that from me being in the army, I'm certain, having been in the army, I'm certain mine is in there. But
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit tough for me to swallow. But I could easily to believe, and I like I said, I do try to keep an open mind about it. But I do it is more palatable to me that maybe maybe they are just diluted. They've diluted themselves out, and a lot of the tribes have either
Well, you were talking before about how, like, with in vitro, they're able to pull out certain aspects. What if they have gotten to the point now where they can look at your genome and go, "Oh, there's the line. There's the one line of code that we need. We can extract just that one. And, oh crap, they've got the other one there. We can get just that one there and put them together." Like, it's it's becoming more of a scary reality than most people want to believe, when not just transhumanism is starting to be talked about more and more, but transspeciesism
mm,
is starting to be normalized in a lot of those backroom chat rooms.
give me
So
that pig lung.
yeah, yeah. So like one of the one again, like the big theory that a lot of are most of them believe that it's going to go this route is that these tribes receded. They're working to build their strength back up again, and when the end game starts, you're going to see a massive outpouring back again of essentially the men of renown, the giants of old. And you're going to see people possessing these supernatural abilities that are just going to blow people away, literally.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
the
you and
Bible,
you could also make the point that some of this talk about the singularity or the metas, and people turning their life bodies or whatever their consciousness over into this ether, this computerized ether, that perhaps that maybe that's a point where in effect, if you're giving your consciousness over to a machine, or to some extent, it is similar to selling your soul, maybe.
yep, it's like
uh,
Ghost in the Shell. I don't know if you watched
I
the
still
movie on.
never seen that one. That's
Well,
like
it's a fantastic movie and series. But one of the episodes in the series, Standalone Complex, there's actually this business guy, and he's making like the best new and improved machine bodies for people to have their consciousness transplanted into. The guy himself literally sacrificed his own humanity, and he's like this little moving trash can of a robot. He's just so all about making money. He's not even a person anymore. He just had his mind put into this shell. So like, you're, oh boy, there's potential that when that end game kicks off, when those seals start popping, and we start getting into to the official, like, last few days, and we get to that time of Noah,
Mhm.
there's potential that you're going to see the Nephilim come on up through the ground
Reemerge, right?
again. It's going
Yeah.
to be like an emergence day, like it's like Gears of War. It's going to be E-Day. It's going to be them coming back on up. You're probably going to see people being able to transplant their consciousness into this, that, and the other. It's very, very possible that anybody who does take the mark of the beast, because the Bible makes it very, very clear that you are given a choice. It's not going to be like, oh, hey, do you want this vaccine? Oh, surprise, you got the mark. It's not going to be
Yeah, I
that.
don't
Like,
that's really not how I don't
no,
think that's how God operates,
no, because the
especially
Bible.
at crucifixion. It's not exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
It is
Bible
a
tells us
time
that
of grace.
within, well, the word says that within him there is no shifting shadow. So we know that because he does not tempt and he can't be tempted, we know that he wouldn't try and pull a fast one on anybody. Um, and so I really do have a suspicion that with as wild and as crazy as people have been and are becoming more so over the last 3 to 4 years, with this whole idea of being able to be gender fluid, or being able to change your gender, period, I have a suspicion that when the mark does come, it is going to, number one, have to do with your DNA. It's going to change you in some capacity. But I believe it will also offer people the ability to change their physical gender at their own will.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you'll see a whole new set of human rights have to be born in the wake of that. And that will lead to utter despotism. And like, that's when you know,
Oh,
okay,
yeah. I think, yeah, at that point, I think we're very dystopian at that point. And not to
yeah,
say that we couldn't be like, that very near future, but at the same time could be much further off. But you're talking, I mean, we're talking about, yeah, how much of your humanity are you giving up
Yep.
to science for, like, for whatever was probably mostly vain, probably most vain purposes, or purposes regarding fear. But that's all the
Yep.
thing. It's like, look, I can offer you immortality if you transfer your consciousness into this computer server or something like that. You know, the question is what does that do to me as my soul?
Yep.
You know, and what does that mean for people when they start choosing that? Is that the end times? Is that it's very whew, I mean, that's the rabbit hole. That's the real
Oh
rabbit hole.
yeah.
We can talk about Nephilim all day, and we're talking about, the origins and everything, and it's a lot of speculation.
Yep.
But like I said, as much speculation as it is, I think your work is incredibly well researched, and it is a
Cool.
compelling argument, that I find compelling. I mean, um I definitely fall into that category of, yeah, this is definitely I do buy into this to a degree. And again, kudos to you for having that will. I think
Thank you.
that ability to drive in there, and learn about that, and not be afraid to talk about it. Even when this ends up being, it can be an intellectual exercise to, because you're not really taking away from or adding. You could possibly even be adding to, um, what the Bible is all about, the fundamentals that it teaches.
Hmm.
Um, Regardless of if there's any benefit in that regard, what you are is you're strengthening not only your own resolve and your own belief, but you're also sharing it so that other people might reach it too. So,
Yep.
again,
Okay.
like I said, we had that conversation before. I was very impressed with what you had to say. I'm so happy for you coming on here
This has been
and
great.
sharing this with me. And this has been a look. This 2.25 hours has gone by very quickly, and
Yeah, it has.
I feel
Uh,
like we should
well,
do
you
this.
said this is a topic that you really can. It's just about inexhaustible. But for anybody out there who's like, I still don't quite get, like, where do I see these tribes starting to erupt inside the Old Testament? If A few places to jump into. Obviously, go through Genesis, go through the whole Torah, because you're going to get pretty much the entire build up to what happens right before Israel's going into Canaan and then into Joshua and Judges. But once you it really helps to get on, like a site that you're on right now, like Bible Gateway is a fantastic tool. Blue Letter Bible is a fantastic tool. eSword is a great tool. You can get yourself you can still find them. They're very, very expensive, but they even have like these 26 translation Bibles. I actually have one.
Oh yeah, I remember. Jeez, everybody, that was like the thing to have back when I was a teenager.
Oh
The
yeah, oh
big
yeah.
monster.
But when you finally and this is I call this the challenge of the Berean gauntlet. It's born of Acts 17:11, and what that more or less boils down to is, don't trust anything that I say. Do your own due diligence and do as the Jews in Berea did, who received the scripture with all joy and all humility. However, they search it daily to see if what they were told is so. Because once you get into Deuteronomy, once you get into Joshua and then into Judges, and you find out, okay, here's where the Nephilim started, here's where the Rephaim started, and what are the tribes associated? Once you start chasing down those tribes, those individual ones, which we could have a whole another conversation on that, because I've gone through and I have detailed every single one of them.
Oh yeah.
You you start to you start to recognize, it's like, oh shoot, it suddenly makes the violence of the Old Testament and this on its face seemingly eugenics program that God is having Israel carry out, it makes it all make sense. It makes it God ordained, and it makes it actually better for mankind in the long run, watching Israel have to take up such a hard stance against these, for all intents and purposes, monsters. It literally clears up the whole idea of God being wrathful in the Old Testament, and now we see so much grace in the New Testament. Yeah, well, because Jesus was born. So, like, do your own due diligence, hunt this stuff down, chase down every single rabbit hole that you can inside the Bible that relates to the Canaanite tribes, the Nephilim tribes, and the Rephaim tribes, and you will see the Bible will read so much clearer to you. It will make so much more sense, and you'll have an answer for somebody when they try and point out to you, oh, well, what about when God says go wipe out all the Amalekites? You're like, huh, Glad you asked that. Do you know who the Amalekites were? Tall as cedars, loud as cannons. And
Strong as
you'll
oak.
have an answer for them.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. And like I said, thank you. Now we did have one comment come in, and I know they're not super. It's not a super chat, but
Sure.
it was somebody who is a friend of yours. I suspect Mr. Thomas Furman,
Yes.
and he said he wanted to ask both of us a purely hypothetical question, and he says he has an okay answer from a logical perspective. Why do you think God sent Jesus at year zero, as we understand it, versus any other time in history?
Well, if we treat the bulk of the Old Testament as Israel's age of conquest, which in a lot of respects it was, up through our book of Daniel, you have 4 kings that Israel ends up having to serve under. Before they're finally released, they get to take the implements from the temple back with them, return to their native land, and then start anew and start afresh. I think God had Jesus specifically come at the time that he did, because even though Israel at that point was under Roman rule, that was probably the most prosperous and the most safe that they were to be able to have someone, the Son of God himself, walking around that region, able to preach and teach without chance of war. Being that Rome was such a powerhouse
Oh
themselves,
yeah.
like they were the guys who made concrete able to set underwater. I think God knew straight out this is going to be the best, least volatile time in Israel's history that I could have my son come down here and be able to essentially teach unfettered by chance of war or violence outside of a mob trying to throw him off a cliff or stone him.
Right. And the Romans were, as far as degenerate as they were, but they were very tolerant of the local customs and everything, and letting,
Oh
as
yeah.
long as you paid your taxes or did your dues or whatever, you could do whatever.
Yeah.
Now,
I
my
love
pers-
that.
I and that it is amazing how that coincides with my take on it, and I think culturally it had reached the time where Jesus, for the Jews, that it had reached the time for Jesus to come, because we see the state of the Pharisees and Sadducees. The
Yep.
Sadducees, the Sadducees don't make any sense to me. Because to me, it's just like you don't have any faith, because it's like there's nothing after this, right? I
Yeah.
think when it's Sadducees, we're just here and then we die and we're
You rot in the
dust.
ground.
But the Pharisees had reached that more of the kind of Christians we don't like, the ones that it's all about the status. It's all about the
Yep.
the networking for betterment or whatnot. It's all about how much you know and how much the what is it, the prosperity evangelicals like
Yo,
us and whatnot.
oh gosh.
Or no, just the uber judgmental Christian types that
The
do better for
legalism.
pushing away. This stuff seemed like it was going on. They were pulling people out. There was no grace, it seemed like, left in Jewish faith. It was the time for Jesus to come and show, look, you guys have you were able to practice, you were living back in the promised land. You're under rule for somebody else, but look at what y'all have done to yourselves. You look at what y'all have become. Now it's time for all those prophecies to come through, because guess what? It's also going to help the prophecy along, because there's going to be a lot of people don't want to hear what you have to say, because guess what? When you're so used to making your own rules up as you go along, it's not fun when somebody comes back and brings the fundamentals. Look, if I'm not
Yep.
if I'm playing bad at a video game and I throw it down in the easy mode, or start using the cheat codes and whatnot, it's not fun when somebody comes back and be like, Yeah, we're playing on normal now."
Yep.
We're gonna do that, and I think that's why, again, people don't like being told that they're wrong, and that's another problem. That's the user problem with Christianity. It's not when it's coming from somebody
Yep.
else. That's the problem that you have with yourself. If you cannot abide deal with being held accountable to the rules,
Yep.
um, that is the problem with you. Now, seeing somebody else have a problem with that can set you as a bad example, set a bad example to the you, where you go like, "Well, I don't really want to be associated with hypocrites," and that seems like that's all there is in Christianity.
Yep.
Don't That's these people being the bad examples. Again,
Oh yeah, it's that old
see
axiom.
the
You can't.
Pharisees.
You should try not to judge a philosophy based on its abuse. It's like if the
Yeah,
philosophy itself, if the words behind it are true and hold up, well, like you mentioned before, you're gonna have bad actors in every single sector of life. However, if the words behind them are what can be trusted, then let the bad actor go and cleave to the words.
yeah, and I think if you're looking for a secular example, capitalism. The
Yeah,
free market.
yeah.
Free market's a great example. When everything works as it should, it is excellent, and
Mhm.
it is free, and it is a meritocracy. It is all these things, but again, you get it corrupted. It's just like, look, and it ends up getting interposed with politics,
Yep.
and that will be a great show when we do one of those, because I'm very much the get back to the basics of judges. That was the best.
Oh man.
That was the best when everybody worshipped God, and we used the Levitical rules to just govern, and it's just like just a judge. You go, well, here's the rules, and here's you guys, and I'm making
Right?
rules case by case basis.
Yep.
But yeah, that's me. That's my and um, I'm glad that you were satisfied with the answer, Thomas, because like I said, I think that you take two takes right there. We had both had two different answers because we're coming at it from two directions. But guess what? They intersected right there when that happened.
Yep.
You had a historical, geopolitical thing, and you had a cultural thing, both intersecting, and it just like the right time, right?
Yep.
And we're looking at this on the not quite Christmas Eve, but on the eve of Christmas when we celebrate. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the big. That's
I
going to
tell
be.
you, God is so cool. God is
Oh,
so
yes.
cool.
That's the whole thing where I went from being the when I grew up, God is a more as a hands-off God after Revelations. He's very
The
hands-off.
clockmaker.
I used to believe. But again, I've seen too many times where it's too much. It's too much
Mhm.
influence that I can't believe that anymore.
Oh yeah.
So all right.
I-
So one last thing, I got a request. I'm sure he's not still awake, but very the son of two very close friends of mine. He is a big fan of My Hero Academia,
Aha.
which you played a voice role in. I think it was Rappa.
Yep.
Okay.
Kendo
Um,
Rappa.
yeah. So if you want to give some sort of greeting or salutations to Aiden,
Aiden.
I'll make sure that I clip this part and send it to him. I'm sure he will find it very cool because he was watching earlier today. He was watching earlier on the stream.
Oh,
On the stream.
wonderful. Right. What's going on there, Aiden? My wife almost wanted to name him Aiden, but I thought Christian Alexander was a bit stronger. But not to denigrate your name, I bet you could put up one hell of a fight. I'll tell you what, you beef up. One of these days, we'll throw down. You just gotta put up a better fight than Fat Gum and that little wimp Redding Red Riot. You hear me, Aiden?
Excellent, excellent. I appreciate that. I appreciate that because that's the me walking up for the autograph for a friend of mine. I know that he's appreciated. But with that said, again, thank you for coming on the show. I'm
Thank you
glad
for
that you.
having me.
And I think that we. I know I want to have more of these, and I think that you are an asset to what I'm trying to do here.
That'd be
So
great. Please.
to everybody who's watching or will watch, please, if you like this stream, like and subscribe. Leave more comments. I've had actually have a active chat tonight, which is something I haven't
Hey.
had yet. So thank you, Eric. You can follow me on Twitter, a flawed man of God. You can find me on Facebook, a flawed man of God. Like the channel. That'll be it. Eric Rolon has a Twitter presence. It's uh, you can just search Eric Rolon, right?
Yeah, just at
Yeah,
Eric Rolon.
at Eric Rolon, at a flawed man of God for me, and the same, and he is Angel Legend. That's one L in Angel Legend. On YouTube, he does have some very good some exposés, I guess, on some of the things like slavery in the Bible, which uh, which are very fulfilling. I like, and I think that they are very well thought out and executed. So, with that said, Eric, again, it's been a blast, and
It has
looking
been.
forward to
Thank
more
you
of
for
these in the
having me.
future. And thank you to the folks. Thomas says, call him a candy cord lord for me. He said you would laugh. But to the folks in the chat,
Yep.
thank you. And we will be having more of these, and hopefully you got at least as much out of this as I did. If you got a fraction of it, you got a lot. So and that with that said, I'm going to end this, and then
Yes.
I'll say goodbye to you, Eric.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, folks. Thank you, and God bless.